Good evening, everyone. This is the May 9th, 2024 Town of Fishkill Planning Board meeting, and we'll call the meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Bad time to you.
Oh, it was your turn.
Okay, yeah, the microphone sounds like it's working okay. So, please silence cell phones and speak into the microphone clearly so that the audience at home can hear us. Tonight we have 6 voting members present, and Anthony Brozier indicated he would not be able to make it to the meeting tonight. So I'd like to appoint alternate member Vijay Gopal as a voting member for tonight's meeting. And also, for those of you who might not have met our RF radio frequency consultant, we have Doug Fishman sitting at the end of the table over there. So welcome, Doug.
Thank you.
And welcome everybody else. All right, the first item on the agenda is the meeting minutes. Board to approve and adopt the March 14, 2024 meeting minutes. I had edited them and sent comments to the planning department. They were all non-substantive corrections. Are there any other comments or corrections on those from board members? All right, would somebody make a motion to approve and adopt the minutes of the March 14, 2024 meeting?
I'll make that motion.
All right.
Second.
Fred moves it, Bob seconds it. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed?
I'm sorry, I don't know how to turn that off.
Oh,
I don't know how to turn it off, seriously.
all right, or see if you can just silence
How do you make it
the ringer.
quiet?
7 in favor. Did I ask if there are any opposed?
No.
All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that passes 7-0. All right, thank you. Okay, we have one public hearing tonight, which is a continuation. This is the Companion Pet Hospital 8 U.S. Route 9 amended site development plan and amended special use permit. Applicant seeks site development plan and special use permit approval to expand the existing veterinary hospital, which shall include the construction of a 2,212 square foot one-story expansion to the existing veterinary hospital building, along with associated site improvements, including parking lot expansion, pedestrian walkways, lighting, landscaping, and replacement of the existing sewage disposal system. I think I will forego reading the rest of the public hearing notice because we already did that at the last meeting and opened it. Just to mention, this is located at 8 U.S. Route 9 in the town of Fishkill, and all of the project will be located within the portion of the property within the town of Fishkill. So since this is a continuation of the public hearing, it was opened by the planning board at the April 11th planning board meeting. I'm not going to ask for a motion to open the hearing. It's already been opened. So I'll ask first, welcome Mr. Rogi, if the applicant team would like to give the board any update in anything that may have happened since the last meeting, since the last public hearing, anything regarding discussion with Carroll Lane residents. We know that you did submit some revised plans, so if you want to just give us a brief overview of any of that, we'd appreciate it.
Sure, that's working right. All right, I'll run you through the changes. The first 2 changes were based on the board comments. We added more landscaping along the southwestern corner of the building facing Route 9. And then we also updated the architectural drawings, and we have a color rendering as well showing the building. So after the meeting, we also did some changes based on the public's comments. First thing we did is we were able to locate the maintenance agreement for Carroll Lane to verify who does the maintenance and, costs and things like that, and verify we do have access through it. We also have added 70 feet of pavement to Carroll Lane, so now it will be paved all the way up just past the site entrance. We also added notes to the plans for restricting parking and storing construction equipment on Carroll Lane. We added notes restricting construction noise and times, and that's based on what was in the town code. We just followed the town code for that. We also verified the lighting is dark sky compliant, and it will have motion sensors, and it's on a timer, so it'll turn on at night, but then only with motion. So that should help. And then we also moved the screening trees up closer to Carroll Lane and added more, so that'll, they're higher, so they'll shield the neighbors from any light or, or seeing the site in general. And that's pretty much all of the changes we did. We also got an email from the town of Phillipstown saying that they don't need to review anything since we're not located, and none of the development is located within their town.
Okay. Have you provided that to the planning office yet?
I have, but I'll officially submit the next submission.
Okay. Thank you. And so just curious whether there were any discussions with Carroll Lane residents since the last meeting?
Yes, the owners did meet with the residents, and she went over all of the changes as shown here, and they seemed to be okay with it, but we'll find out tonight if we did a good job on that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. So I read the rules of conduct for public hearings at the April 11th hearing, so I won't read them again. Please raise your hand if you would like to speak tonight. When recognized, please come up to the podium and give us your name and address, and speakers will have a limit of 4 minutes. Yes, ma'am, come on up.
Hello, I'm Natalie Beglin. I'm at 219 Carroll Lane. I just want to thank the board for reading all my letters and hearing all my concerns regarding the issues in my neighborhood, and I want to say I'm appreciative of the changes that Companion has made regarding our concerns. One concern that I still have is the level of traffic. The mine has put in a road, it's not finished yet, directly across from Carroll Lane, so I'm concerned about the level of traffic increasing when that road does become used and Companion opens their larger business. I'm just curious if there is any kind of Department of Transportation study or anything that can be done to perhaps consider putting in a turning lane for Carroll Lane. I'm not sure what can be done and what can't, but I just wanted to ask. Yes. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else like to speak tonight? Yes, sir, come on up.
Gary Marino, 227 Carroll Lane. I met with Hope, and we spoke, and we hashed out quite a few things that was mentioned. The only thing I have to ask is, I believe, are you the architect? Engineer. You said there was going to be a staging area?
Well, could you please...
Sorry. You said there was going to be a staging area for during construction. Do you know where that's going to be?
Well, so we won't have direct question and answer back and forth. We can, see if we can address things after you speak.
The issue was that the hospital's still going to be open during construction. So, and I know that Hope and her husband are never at the location. So we're trying to avoid having any confrontations with the construction vehicles, if they're going to listen, not to park on the road. I know they've instructed them, but they're not there. So the last thing we want is to have any sort of a confrontation to get the cars or the trucks off the road. And it was mentioned that there was going to be a staging area, and I was just wondering where that would be if the hospital is still open. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Also, I'll just mention now that we're going to continue the discussion after the public hearing. There's an agenda item for the project review, so we'll probably be able to get to some of those details a little bit later on. But if somebody can keep a note so that we can remember to talk about that. So we're going to ask about the staging area. Where is that for the construction vehicles? All right. Yes, sir, come on up.
Hello, my name is Ihab Elnakash. I'm 246 Carroll Lane. I spoke with Hope as well. I like the ideas of the dark skies compliance, so, you know, that was one of the biggest concerns I had about light coming in, you know, because I live up the road. But for the town more so is, as mentioned earlier, traffic, because it's just south of the entrance, the speed limit goes up to 55. And like going northbound, that's where cars are starting to accelerate. And then coming southbound, traffic coming in. Is there any kind of thought of putting maybe traffic light or something there to slow things down in both directions, just to allow traffic? Because, you know, I don't know, it's just kind of, the corner up above is kind of blind, so it, you know, it's not really their thing, it's more for the town. Just something to consider. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to speak tonight? Yes, sir, come on up.
Good evening. John McGuire, 233 Carroll Lane. Just heard that we have a maintenance agreement for our road. That's the first I'm hearing about it. The residents of Carroll Lane have a verbal agreement. We all do our part. We all contribute money to the road and fix our road. So I'd like to see a copy of this maintenance agreement, just to see what's going on, see where it came from, how long it's been in place and whatnot. So if you could have them send us a copy, we would really appreciate it. They have our emails. I would love to have a copy of that.
Well, I believe, not in response per se, but just so you know, I believe the planning department is in receipt of that material
It's
along
actually
with
online with
others.
the agenda because it was part of the submission.
It's online, the maintenance agreement?
Everything that's on the screens tonight is uploaded to the website.
All right.
If you click on the agenda packet, you'll see everything that was,
I'll see a maintenance agreement?
you'll see everything that was in the, yep.
So was the maintenance agreement just made up recently, or was it,
It was submitted to the board on April 24th.
so it's something new?
No, sir, it's not new, it was.
If I may.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So, you know, as part of their submission, they included a recorded maintenance agreement that's part of chain of title, presumably for all people that have access to Carroll Lane. You can, as Debbie mentioned, it is part of the town's file, and it is accessible on the town's website. I'm sure that they would be able to provide you with a copy. I will say a couple things about it, as long as the topic came up. First of all, the copy that we have on the town appears only to be the first page. It looks like there's a 2-page agreement. That said, it looks like only on the second page would be the signatures of the property owners at that time. It looks like to be a very old road maintenance agreement, probably when Carroll Lane was originally constructed or thereabouts. It doesn't really say anything. So don't get your hopes up one way or the other. It just says everybody's got to share in the cost, and imagine, of maintaining Carroll Lane. So
Which we do now.
So I think your verbal agreement is probably very consistent with this. It doesn't say anything else beyond that.
I can honestly tell you that there's only one, I've been there for 48 years.
Yeah.
And my name, the McGuire name will be on there, maybe. That might have been put in place way before we moved there in 1976.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, I was very young then. My parents bought the house, and I knew that there was never an agreement because nobody ever maintained anything. We've been very lucky lately to get all the neighbors involved and get things done.
Yeah. My neighbor doesn't like me.
We take a lot of pride in our road, and we've spent a lot of money on our road, so that's why we're trying to protect what we have.
Yeah.
Okay. The other issue I had was during construction, is there going to be facilities for workers? I was concerned about that. I want to make sure that when people pull up in their vehicles, there's garbage cans so they could get rid of their coffee in the morning, so it's not blowing onto our lawns, and that people are using the facilities instead of using the door of their vehicle. So that's a big concern, because there are children on the road, and my grandchildren come up and down there, so I would really love for that to be. Okay? So we're just, you know what it is, we're trying to protect what we have. And we want to make sure that things are done correctly, and that's where it comes from. All right? Thank you very much.
Very good. Thanks for speaking. Is there anyone else who would like to speak tonight? I don't see anyone else. I'll just mention that we received an email today from Ed Bushick with comments regarding the proposed animal hospital expansion, and that email has been entered into the public hearing record. I won't read it because we do have it for the record. Having said that, let me just wait 1 second and make sure nobody else wants to speak to this matter tonight. And seeing none, the board's going to need to decide whether to close the public hearing tonight or continue the hearing at the June 13th meeting. We've already continued it once. I'll note that the applicant did submit the revised landscaping plan and the architectural drawings that we asked for. So I'll look over to our attorney and our engineer for advice on whether we should close the hearing tonight.
The board previously kept the public hearing open to provide the applicant an opportunity to address the concerns that were raised by the public, and now the applicant did that, and also you've had an opportunity to hear from the neighbors as well, and all those concerned with the project. In my opinion, there's been a full and fair opportunity for the public to review and comment on this application to inform the board as it continues its review.
I agree.
Okay. What do board members think? All right. Would somebody like to make a motion to close this public hearing tonight?
So moved. I'll second it.
Felix moves it, and Fred seconds it. Further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The public hearing is closed by a vote of 7-0. All right, so as I said, we'll continue the discussion about this application a little bit later tonight under project review. So anyone interested, please hang around. Okay, we have a number of requests for extensions of approval, so that kind of made the agenda look a little bit longer than it probably will be. These should be fairly quick, but let's start right in. And it looks like this first one is for the O'Connell and Eastern View Developers lot line realignment. So Kevin O'Connell is an alternate member on the board and is one of the applicants, so we'll ask you to step down from the dais just for this brief moment. And this is the O'Connell Eastern View Developers lot line realignment. Board is to review the submission made by the applicant's representative on April 24th, 2024, which requests a 90-day extension of the resolution of preliminary and conditional final approval that the board adopted on January 11th, 2024. All right, welcome, Mr. Burns.
Good evening.
How are you tonight?
Well, how
Good.
I hope all of you are the same.
We're all doing good. So just briefly explain the need for the extension.
We need the extension just in case something happens over the next month where our submission is not, there's a problem with the submission of the deeds, or that everything has been submitted for the project and it's just awaiting for our conditions to be reviewed and accepted so that you could actually sign the map. The map is sitting on the table in my office, the actual Mylar.
Good. All right. I'll ask our attorney, Dominic Cordisco, if you have any comments or concerns with any legal aspects of this proposal.
No, they're entitled to the extension. I would recommend that the board consider granting it.
Okay. Any comments or questions from board members? All right. Is there a motion to approve the request for a 90-day extension of the resolution of preliminary and conditional final approval for the O'Connell and Eastern View developers for lot line realignment?
So moved.
Felix moves it. Is there a second?
I second.
Ravi seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, the next extension we have is for Continental Commons lot line realignment. This is board to review submission made by the applicant's representative on April 18th, 2024, which requests a 90-day extension of the resolution of preliminary and conditional final approval that the board adopted on December 14th, 2023. Seems like just yesterday. So, welcome, Mr. Cooper. Why don't you just briefly explain the need for this extension?
Sure. For the record, Corey Salomon from Zarin and
Corey
Steinmetz
Salomon,
covering for David Cooper this evening. Yeah. So as you know, there was several conditions of approval. There was, I think, 3 or 4 easements that had to be drafted and provided to a couple to the town and 1 to the village of East Fishkill, or village of Fishkill to sign. Those easements have been submitted probably 4 or 5 months ago, and so we're just dependent on something outside of our control. I believe that they've all been authorized to be signed. We're just awaiting signatures on those easements now. So we believe we'll get them before the expiration, but just in an abundance of caution, we're asking for a 90-day extension.
All right. Again, looking to our attorney, any questions or legal concerns about this one?
No, sir. It's an appropriate request at this time.
Questions, comments from board members?
No.
All right. Who would like to make a motion to approve this request for a 90-day extension of the resolution of preliminary and conditional final approval for the Continental Commons lot line realignment?
I'll take care of it.
Fred moves it. Is there a second?
Second.
Is that Bob?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Any further discussion?
Nope.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries 7-0.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. So we have another extension request. This one is for 1556 Route 52, 1562 Route 52, site development plan, a special use permit. Board to review the submission made by the applicant's representative on April 24, 2024, which is a request for a 6-month extension of the resolution of preliminary and conditional final approval that the board adopted on June 8th, 2023. Welcome back.
Yes, I figure I'm here so I can talk about it.
Yeah. So just if you could briefly explain what this extension is for.
Sure. We've been dealing with the DOT and agreements for the water and sewer. The DOT review took a long time to come and requested a traffic study, so we've been working on that. And our agreements for water and sewer are based on agreements with the fire district next door, which are also based on agreements with the shopping plaza across the road. So we can't finalize our agreements until the fire district finalizes their agreements, so we're waiting right now for that. Those are really the only 2 things that are outstanding right now that we're still working on.
Good, okay, thank you. I will just mention that you also submitted a cost estimate for site improvements, which we didn't have before, and those dollar amounts were not put in the resolution of approval, which is fine, but what I think will happen at this point is, if we do pass the extension, our engineer, John Bodendorf, will take those amounts and put amounts in a memo to the planning board and the applicant, just to reiterate what those are going to be, and then also a recommended amount for the performance bond and a memo to the town board is our usual practice. So, having said that, again, I'll ask our attorney, Mr. Cordisco, if there are any comments or concerns on the legal aspects of this one.
No, sir.
All right. Any questions, comments from board members?
I just, did he, waiting for a traffic study, did he say that?
From
Yes.
Did you?
Yes.
And who requested that, DOT?
DOT.
So I think what you're basically indicating is that DOT still has their approvals left to give.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to determine if a left turn in lane is going to be required on Route 52. Our study says it is not, so we need the DOT to agree with our analysis.
Okay. Yeah.
Another left turn lane.
All right. Well, let us know how that goes.
Well,
All right. Ron, any questions from you? Just
No, like you said, they submitted the bond estimates so we can prepare those memos in a timely manner.
all right. Is there a motion to approve the request for a 6-month extension of the resolution of preliminary and conditional final approval for the 1556 and 1562 Route 52 site development plan and special use permit?
So moved.
Felix moves that. Is there a second?
Second.
We'll give it
I think that was Bob.
It was.
It was neck and neck. All right. Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes 7-0. Okay. Very good. Well, you might as well stay right there, because now we're moving on to our first project review, which happens to be Companion Pet Hospital amended site development plan and special use permit, or to review the submission made by the applicant's representative on April 24, 2024. And since it was such a long time ago, I'll just reiterate that the public hearing was just closed. And I'll ask Mr. Roby if there are anything else you would like to mention. You've indicated what revisions were made in the site plan. Anything else you would like to go over?
no, I think I went through all the changes that were done, but I would like to just add that there was questions about construction staging, and generally you would put it in a flat area of pavement before it's paved, so any construction staging is going to be within the site, close to where the building is going to be. That's usually how construction works, and they always have a porta-john and dumpsters on site as well. That's standard practice for every construction site, so those issues should be handled.
Do you have an idea of like how many people workforce they're going to have?
You mean for employees?
No.
For construction.
Construction workers.
For the construction.
How many workers?
It's not a very large construction project. I don't think it's going to be many.
I mean, it's only 2,000 square feet, right?
Yes.
It's 2,100 square feet.
Yes.
And that construction area is normally fairly well secured and fenced off, so people can't like wander in who aren't supposed to be there.
Yes.
Just curious, does the building department, when they issue a building permit, require, all that kind of stuff to be specified?
I'm not sure. I've never been to a site without them, so somebody is making sure they're at every site.
Okay.
And how long do you think it will take?
I'm not sure what we estimated, maybe a year or so. You'll get the site work done, then you'll get the building up, and then it'll continue on the inside for a while. So it'll be 2 phases, and then you'll come back and button up the outside. It shouldn't, again, it's not a very big project, so it shouldn't take very long.
Put it in the basement.
Yes,
You are putting in the basement.
Fred, I'm sorry. Microphone, please.
Are you putting in the basement?
yes, the architect has continued on their design of the building when they were working on the rendering, and based on how high off native ground the building is going to be, they needed to put a decent footing, so it made sense to just put a basement in underneath, just because you'd have wasted space. So we do have steps going down to the basement from the outside on the south side of the building. Right here.
I guess just another question regarding that asphalt paving of the entrance to Carroll Lane. That most likely is something that would require approval from state DOT, isn't it?
I ran that by the DOT and they said no. They were happy to hear it was going to get paved in that area. And they said as long as it's not in their right of way, that they have no jurisdiction there.
And as long as it doesn't change the drainage going into the state's drainage pattern?
I can forward emails to you.
Yeah, that would be very helpful, actually.
Okay.
And let's see, was there anything else brought up during the public hearing? One person did mention whether DOT might be able to put up some kind of a warning light or signal on Route 9. That's something that's beyond our purview, but certainly is it something that DOT, I suppose, could consider if they think it was necessary. Again, this isn't something that the planning board required, a full traffic study for, obviously, because it's a very small addition, and especially when it was scaled down from the elimination of the dog training facility. So it's not something where, we would have had direct correspondence with DOT, really.
In addition, because of the limited size of the proposal, it is a type 2 action under seeker. So the board's jurisdiction over general environmental concerns, including traffic, is limited. And so once you've typed it as type 2 action, it really ends your environmental review.
Good. All right, well, there was a short memo from CPL from our engineer. You want to quickly mention that?
Yeah, there were a few repeat comments, one being providing evidence from the town of Phillipstown that they have no reason to review the project, and it sounds like you got an email from them, so that's good. Submitting correspondence and approval from the health department when available. We talked about the maintenance agreement and that what was submitted wasn't really complete, and it's not clear if it was ever executed, but it does look like it was recorded, so but I'm not sure that it's being followed. Anyway, the only other comment I had was the board had asked for additional landscaping, and they provided updated architectural elevations and renderings, and just making sure the board is good with all that. They look pretty good to me.
Good, thank you. Just on that, I looked at the revised landscaping plans and the architectural drawings, and I thought they looked good. To see if any other board members had any thoughts on that. I think the landscaping, they did basically what we asked them to do. And the architectural plans, there were some slight modifications from the previous version of the addition, but it looks like it's basically quite compatible with the existing building, which is what these kinds of additions are supposed to do. I did notice there was one wall sign and detail on sheet A201 of the architectural elevations. That looks fine. Any other questions or comments from board members?
I had one. With that letter that we got today from Ed, he mentioned a piece of the code talking about acreage allowed for an animal hospital. And it seems like it's probably pre-existing that hospital's been there, but my question to Dominic is, if they are expanding it, does that then kick in that zoning or not?
I have to apologize. I haven't seen this letter, so if it's something that came in today.
It was an email that came in.
Today, yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't have it in
I may
front
not
of me.
have sent it to, I may have missed Dominic and John today, to be honest with you.
Let's see.
I know, John, you have it, right?
I mean, if that's the case, I'd like to review it and then report back at their next appearance on that particular issue.
Okay, yeah, because I'm just wondering if that makes anything kick in at all.
Understood.
I can give a bit of summary on that,
Yeah,
if you want. That acreage is noted under special use permits for animal hospital, but if you also look in the bulk table for the GB district, under the permitted uses, it says
Right.
animal hospital, 2 acres.
Okay.
So it says 2 different acreages in 2 different spots.
That sounds like code.
Yeah, well, that could be a legal question then as
Yeah.
to which of those prevails.
Right, yeah, this is,
My understanding of schedules of regulations is that they're usually supposed to provide kind of a summary of what's in the text of the code and making it easier to understand, but when there are conflicts, I'm not quite sure what the usual legal criteria is for which controls. So that's
yeah,
the
just
question.
something.
Yes.
Something I think needs to just be looked at.
It's something that, I would not want to make an off-the-cuff response
Of course.
in
Yeah.
connection with this, so,
The thing about that is, though, there is that section of the code it goes beyond the general special permit requirements, and this is an actual specific requirement listed among several other uses, each use having their own special permit criteria that have to be met. So I don't think I was even aware of that in the initial part of this review, so that's probably something else to take a look at, and that's where the 10-acre threshold is found. So I think my notes on that email reference what that section is. I can't remember what it is, but so interesting. Thanks for bringing that up, Felix.
No, thank you. No, yeah, he brought it up. I didn't, I'm just bringing it up in the meeting.
So again, Dominic reminded us that the seeker was reclassified as a Type 2 action once the dog training facility was deleted from the proposal. So given that we've gone through the public hearing and that there's no further seeker review, and I guess pending this one question regarding the special permit criteria for 10-acre versus 2-acre issue that we just talked about, I'll look to you, Dominic, to ask whether at this point you think it would be appropriate to authorize for the planning board to authorize the drafting of a resolution for consideration up for the June 13th meeting. And I guess when we do these, it certainly can be considered, and if there are any remaining issues or questions, the board doesn't have to go ahead and do it, but it might help to have that available for that meeting.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Mr. Chairman.
All right. What does the board think about that? All right, well, would somebody like to make a motion authorizing our planning board attorney to draft a resolution of preliminary, I'd say preliminary and conditional final, amended site development plan and special use permit approval?
So moved.
All right, Bob moved it. Is there a second?
Second.
BJ, thank you. Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so we will take a look at that draft resolution and hopefully hear back on that legal question of acreage for the special permit use. And I think that's probably it for the night, unless you have any other questions.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Good. All right, the next item is 62 Greenwood Drive, land development permit. Good to see you again.
Introduce yourself.
Hey, you've been busy. Board to review a draft resolution of reapproval and consider its adoption. All right, any update on this project?
No, we talked about it at the last meeting, so I think, I think there was some changes to the resolution in regards to like the engineering comments. I think I noticed that in there, so yeah, I think I read through it. It looks fine to me.
All right, so we do have a draft resolution. Dominic, why don't you go ahead and run us through that draft resolution that you prepared?
Yes, I'll try to do it quickly
Yeah.
because we have a lot of other items on the agenda, and bearing in mind that the board had previously approved, this project for 62 Greenwood Drive. And what's been prepared is a resolution of reapproval for the land development permit for the construction at 62 Greenwood. The draft that you should have before you is draft number 3. It's dated April 24th, 2024. It follows exactly the conditions and statement of facts as far as the processing of the application from the previously approved one, with the exception of the fact that one of the conditions in the original approval was that outstanding engineering issues had to be addressed as per the memo from CPL, and since that time that those engineering issues have been addressed and have been resolved. So all other conditions remain the same, and in the spirit of brevity, I will not go through them all, unless you really want me to.
Yes, thank you.
So
we all thank you. All right, any questions or comments from board members?
No, sir.
And Mr. Bodendorf, any other comments you would like to make? Okay.
No.
All right then, is there a motion to approve and adopt the resolution of reapproval, land development permit for 62 Greenwood Drive as reviewed tonight?
I'll make it.
All right, Fred moves it. Is there a second?
I second.
Robbie seconds it. Is there any further discussion?
No.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes 7-0. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are you done? Coming up, she's done.
I think you can go home now. Thanks. Have a good evening. All right. The next item on the agenda is the Fantausi 3-lot subdivision. Board to review the application and supporting documentation that was accepted at the April 11th, 2024 Planning Board meeting. Welcome.
Hello.
So, I guess at this meeting, hopefully we'll be able to give you some further direction on how to handle this application, whether an amended application will need to be submitted. And so why don't we start with John Bodendorf's memo on engineering matters that was dated May 5th.
Okay, so for seeker, subject to concurrence from planning board attorney, we believe the project should be classified as an unlisted action under seeker. We noted that a maintenance agreement for the proposed shared driveway is going to need to be provided at some point for review by our office and the planning board attorney. The plans didn't include any, well, they provided a survey which had topography on it, but the actual subdivision plan had no topography, grading, erosion control, any of that. So we didn't do a real in-depth review at this point because there's a lot of stuff missing. Those are all noted in the plat comments. I think the biggest one, and it was discussed at the last meeting, is the way Lot 3 is shown right now is not approvable. So they either need to combine that with the lot owned by the adjacent owner as part of this subdivision process, or it would have to be a standalone action at some point in the future, and they just take that Lot 3 notation out for this. I mean, ideally, it's done now because it would eliminate the existing encroachment by the adjacent property owner, but I understand that, you know, that may not be feasible. So that was the big thing, and we'll probably have some additional comments after we get updated plans with additional information.
A quick comment on the lot in the back. The existing property owner, Mr. Ray, he already engaged with the adjacent property owner, and he's amenable to the transaction, and they have a road maintenance agreement. So I'll get that, and I'll submit it to you guys. And what we're going to do, I had worked with Debbie over the past, since the last meeting to this meeting, and we're just going to submit an amended application with the adjacent property owner on this application, so it's going to be like a joint transaction. And we're looking to get it all done in one shot.
That's good.
A quick comment. One of the comments you had made was about the peculiarity of the line. So a quick comment on that is that something that is going to result in difficulties upon further review? The reason that it's like this is
I understand you're
I'm balancing two requirements of achieving the minimum lot area while also not encroaching onto the minimum setbacks of the septic system. So, you know, if I drew a neater line, it wouldn't achieve the area requirement.
right.
And I can't legally encroach via the health department onto the reserve area without going back and getting the reserve area moved, which was quite a muscle movement in itself. So this is like the bare minimum in order to achieve that.
I mean, that brings up another question that I just thought of. Has the health department seen this layout?
Yes.
Because it doesn't look like you have 10-foot separation from...
Yeah, we got this all approved with this in mind.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, well, as long as you're confident you're not going to have a problem with them.
Yeah.
It's a tough nut to make the area and everything work out. I just wasn't sure if there was another way to do it where there's not so many
Turns.
jogs. And,
Yeah.
but if that's the only way it works, I don't think the property is being subdivided for a family member, right?
Yeah.
So that makes it a little more amenable.
Okay, sounds good. I'll try to tighten it up as much as possible, but I'm trying to work within those constraints. There's no like code restriction on a peculiar
No, it's
lot
just,
arrangement. It
you
just
know,
looks weird.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a generic provision in the town code, something to the effect that irregular lot lines should be avoided, but it's not a, black and white kind of an issue. It doesn't say you can't have something like that. It has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis, so.
I guess under that context, I'm suggesting that it's difficult to avoid.
Yeah. So that would be taken into consideration in this particular case.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, I have what I need. We're just going to make a amended application for the next meeting.
One thing that we did talk about at the last meeting, and I think maybe is referenced a little bit in the CPL memo, is the existing easement language for the common driveway. I think it would be appropriate for you to submit the easement so that our engineer and attorney could see what the current easement is and whether perhaps any changes to that may be needed for adding an additional lot to it.
Okay, I'll be sure to submit that in the maintenance agreement.
Yeah. And then also, John mentioned the need to see a common driveway maintenance agreement for the common driveway. Other than that, any other questions from board members before we move on?
But that was all what we asked for this meeting.
Well, I think the applicant had some conversations with Debbie and chose not to pursue an amended application for this meeting, not knowing for sure what all the details were going to be and what would need to be addressed, and so now we know.
Yeah, we only had like 3 or 4 days last time to submit it, so.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments, board members? Or anything else from our consultants?
No, sir.
A question I had was, given we submit an amended application from a zoning perspective, does this seem as of right, or does this seem like it needs to go to the zoning board? My perception is that it doesn't. I don't know if that's something that you could comment on.
Well, I don't think any of us have seen anything that would send it to the zoning board, but you probably want to check or double check with our building department, our zoning administrator, Joel Petrus.
So I checked with him, and he had a differing opinion about it, which I didn't agree with in particular. So.
Oh, well, what was his opinion? Just because I don't know that we.
Well, that's actually the reason why one of the reasons why we submitted formally to the planning board to get an interpretation of it.
Well, the thing is, the planning board really doesn't and can't make interpretations of things like that. We look at the subdivision regulations and, the lot requirements and try to make our best decisions on whatever we've heard from the building inspector, zoning administrator. But as far as I know, we haven't heard anything directly from Joel on that regard.
Okay, awesome.
So I was going to, while you were out.
Sorry, I'm trying to assist him, his laptop is not working.
All right, well, while you were out, we were just talking about whether there were any zoning interpretations that Joel may have made or informally.
It was referred to him, but he did not respond.
All right, that's what I thought the answer would be.
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, we just can only do what we know and what facts are before us. We don't make interpretations or determinations ourselves. So,
Do you mind sharing what he potentially said and what you didn't agree with?
Yes, so the discussion had to do with the minimum road frontage requirement, which has to do with it being 25 foot or 50 foot, or whether or not. So this proposal we have here, we carved out a 25-foot right-of-way to give access to this lot. This lot has road frontage here, so this lot and this lot achieve the road frontage requirements. This back lot didn't and never had road frontage, but it's not changing. So it's an existing non-conforming use that's not being made more non-conforming. So the discussion was whether or not this 25-foot strip to provide access to this lot with the 25-foot road frontage is sufficient. That was the discussion.
Well, here's my suggestion, and Dominic, you might be able to weigh in on this, but when there are questions like this that require interpretations, I mean, normally, it would be the building inspector who makes a determination, and if that's not something that the applicant agrees with, you can file a request to the Zoning Board of Appeals for an interpretation or determination by the ZBA. I think, and this is where, Dominic, your assistance might help, that where there's this kind of unresolved question, and I'm surprised that there wasn't a written determination by the building department.
Yeah.
But where there isn't, but there's some question in the applicant's mind whether the applicant is entitled to apply to the ZBA for an interpretation.
I think the path would be for the applicant to request something in writing from the building inspector.
And then,
that way it either goes one way or the other, and then the applicant knows which path they need to go.
and if the building inspector or zoning administrator puts in writing what you've basically relayed to us and you don't agree with it or you aren't sure about it, then that can be taken to the ZBA.
So...
But that's not the planning board's jurisdiction.
So theoretically, if that didn't happen, we could get planning board approval?
If none of that happened?
Well, I mean, like, the building inspector, the zoning administrator has been given the opportunity to comment on this, yes? So if he doesn't comment on it between now and the next meeting...
That's above my pay grade.
Yeah.
Debbie?
All I can say is if you need to request in writing an interpretation from him. He got a referral, that doesn't necessarily, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dominic or the chairman, that doesn't necessarily means he's been given a directive to issue an interpretation. So that's what you need to request.
So who issues the directive for him to give an interpretation?
You have to
You have
request
to
it.
request it.
Okay.
Yeah, the referral Debbie is talking about is when the application was
comments.
first provided to us, we refer it through the planning office to the
So
building department.
can you go to the zoning board without a referral from the planning board?
Well, that's what I was asking, and
Because typically, like, you have to go to the planning board, and then the planning board says, nah, this looks like you need to get a variance, you need to go to the zoning board.
It depends. So if you get a determination from the building inspector that says that this application is deficient with bulk requirements, then you can go directly from that to the zoning board of appeals. It's not typically this board's practice to actually refer.
That's right.
It's to identify potentially things that are deficient as a course of their review, but then it's up to the applicant to make that application.
So I think we're all on the same wavelength with that. So basically, I think it is basically going to be up to you to
So-
put your...
So we have to make a formal
a formal request in a letter
Request.
to the building inspector or zoning administrator.
So is that a document or an email, or what's
You
the?
have to call him and ask him that.
But I would assume a letter would probably be the safest way to do
I would
it.
think so.
And then can that be done in parallel with the effort of this planning board action, or is that in series to it?
I would think.
Well, I mean, I think in a way, you might not really want to spend a lot more time or energy if it's going to look like you're going to need to go through a whole process with the ZBA. You know, we were waiting for an amended application to even just look at seeker and decide what type of action this is going to be, which I think is pretty obvious, but we can't do that tonight. So, I don't know. I think our attorney gave you some good direction.
Okay, sounds good. Anything else?
Nope, I think that's good for tonight.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, thanks for coming. Okay. Homeland Towers Communication Tower, 73 Route 9 Site Development Plan and Special Use Permit. Board to review the submissions made by the applicant's representative on April 10th and April 24th, 2024, and to consider a report and recommendations from the planning board's RF radio frequency engineering consultant. So welcome.
Thank you. If I could just introduce myself, my name is Doug Warden. I am a partner in the law firm of Snyder and Snyder. If you're paying attention, you notice that I'm not the same attorney who has been appearing previously. His name is David Kenny. He's my law partner. I'm appearing just this one instance on his behalf because I'm pleased to report that David and his wife have given birth to their first child, a fine-looking 7-pound, 7-ounce baby boy named Liam, and he's taking some time to get to know his new family member. So I will do my best here tonight. I promise I don't quite have the depth of knowledge and familiarity with all of this, but my understanding is that at the last, since the last meeting, we've made 2 submissions, and one largely considered radio frequency emissions matters, and another one was a variety of things, had a variety of submissions, including a visual analysis that was based upon a balloon test, including some viewpoints that the board may have had some input in choosing and directing, and so we're really just here to respond to any questions and help move this forward in any way we can.
All right. Well, just question, is there anyone on the team tonight who might be able to tell us a little bit more about the visual impact analysis that was done and submitted? Or I know we've all had a chance to look through it, and our consultant from CPL has also, but just wondering whether you'd like to take the opportunity to run us through any of the material like that.
Yes, I'd like to introduce Klaus Wimmer from Homeland Towers. You may have met him before, but he has been intimately involved in the creation and organization of the visual resource analysis.
Good. That would be great.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, as members of the Planning Board. Klaus Wimmer, I'm the regional manager with Homeland Towers. The balloon test itself was conducted by Saratoga Associates, and we had the photographers, I think 2 field photographers in the area taking the photos from various viewpoints that have been identified. and a report to that effect was submitted from Saratoga Associates. Okay.
All right. Well, why don't we ask Liz Axelson, who is here tonight, and also John Bodendorf, to go through CPL's memo, and a lot of that includes some comments on things like the visual impact assessment. So why don't we get right to that and see where we go.
Okay, my name is Liz Axelson. I'm with CPL. I'm the Planning Board's consulting planner. And John and I did a review. I did a lot of it because it's environmentally relevant. Dated May 6, and I'm going to kind of skip right in onto page 2. A lot of these comments have to do with the telecommunications towers, regulations, but also seeker. So my comment number 5 indicates that the EAF is inadequate for a number of reasons. It definitely had been revised, and there's a lot more information in there, but there's some key issues that need to be addressed. As you said, the balloon test was held on March 16, 2024. It was a Saturday. It was noticed so that the public could come out and watch, and we did see the crew all over taking pictures at various places. I did look at the visual resource assessment in detail, and I did look at all the different views, so I'm not gonna go point by point. When I was done boiling it down, where I got to, I express in my comment number 7 on page 2, is that both the EAF and the text in the VRA, the Visual Resource Assessment, really didn't hone in on some of the CPU objectives that have to do with the Route 9 corridor. So I have a couple of comments at the bottom of page 2, 7A through D. So one of the things that I observed is that there's a comment in the VRA that says that much of the Route 9 corridor has dense vegetation around it, and that is true to a great extent, except that there are a couple of points on Route 9 where the views open up wide, and there are plenty of views, and a lot of those are kind of close together, and the views of the tower from Route 9, which is considered to be kind of a scenic and aesthetic corridor, sort of a tourist route, it will definitely be prevalent and out of place within the scenery. So the visual resource assessment didn't really cover those aspects of the CPU, which the board has, the board and the town board just adopted in 2023, kind of looking at various corridors in the town, thinking these are important places, we want to keep them as nice as possible. So those comments deal with that, and I just want to make a point that for a lot of people, tourism is just about getting in the car and driving someplace and maybe having lunch and stopping someplace nice. And it's the view that they see along the way. So they're not walkers, they're not hikers, they're not bikers necessarily. But there are basically 3 points right in the middle of there where the view is wide, and it's along Route 9, and it's New York State Route 9 at Carroll Lane. There's a huge view there. New York State Route 9 at the Battery Monument, which is a historical marker. And that's photo and simulation number 17. And then New York State Route 9 at the project site. Again, it's the project site, but it's also along this sweep of road that happens to open up, and you can see the mountains, depending on which side of the road you're on. So all 3 of those views include the backdrop of the mountainous landscape on either side of Route 9, and that's part of what makes the corridor scenic. So I think there wasn't enough elaboration on that, and that's kind of a key impact area. And then I didn't do, those are my core comments about the visual impact assessment, except that we do need a visual EAF addendum, and there are other comments that kind of tie in with this. And then I'm going on to page 3. So the design of the telecommunications tower, I think, is pretty important. And my comment 12D talks about alternative or stealth designs. And I've mentioned several in that comment. Something that would appear to be a monument, a water tower, a fire tower, a silo, a smooth brown pole. That those are all alternative designs worthy of consideration. I think that probably the monument wouldn't be the one most recommended. A false water tower, false fire tower, those are designs that could accommodate antennas externally. And the smooth brown pole one that I had said in my comment talks about antennas inside, but I also saw something off of Route 28 up near Woodstock where it's a pole, and so it's a matte finish brown pole, and it has a green thing. It's not Frankenpine arms, but the antennas are painted green. So it kind of blends in a little more. So I think there are some stealth technologies that should be considered, and especially the visual resource assessment should provide the planning board with views from the most visible points showing those stealth technologies so they can have a look. And I think that, I have to say, the visual resource assessment was pretty honest in one respect, is that the metal pole looks very silvery in the landscape. And there is another comment where I emphasize the fact that we're talking about a galvanized steel pole. I don't know that it would necessarily be that brilliant silver. I'm thinking of more of a brushed finish that would make it less reflective. And then let's just see. I noticed that in regards, I'm getting to zoning setbacks and requirements now, just for a moment. There's verbiage about a lease area, but it's not shown. My observation is that it's really maybe preferred and almost to the applicant's benefit to have those setbacks come from the lot line. So and I do see that they switch back and forth. So from where the compound is to the front, you have a nice big setback there. So I think it's worth having those setbacks be consistently off of lot lines instead of a lease area, which it's not shown anywhere. So that's a suggestion. But one thing I think that should be outlined and shown to be preserved, there are some hefty rows of white pines along the site frontage. And I said that it would be worth it to make sure that those are not removed. That some kind of notation, it just be outlined as an area of white pines and described specifically so that those would be retained, because they'll hide a lot of the lower parts of the development. And then I'm going over to full environmental assessment form. I'm looking at page 5, comment number 21. This again goes over the importance of the comprehensive plan update as an important land use plan, and that these points are to have the applicant come back and make some revisions to elaborate more on these and to acknowledge the importance of things. And it talks about how this corridor starts from the town of Phillipstown and extends all the way to the town of Fishkill. And there definitely are nice places along there. So this length should be treated as best possible with alternative designs to try to keep the scenic nature of the Route 9 corridor. So there are a couple of points there. And then I'm going to just skip the procedural aspect for a second. On page 7, comment number 33, that's where I talk about showing and labeling the existing trees and shrubs and showing those to be retained. And a complete lot area and bulk table should be provided. It doesn't really cover everything. And again, the suggestion is to measure from the lot line. And then I think we need to hear, before I talk about any procedural things on page 6, we would probably like to hear from the RF consultant, unless the board has questions about my comments.
Well, let's first see if the applicant team has any questions about what Liz just went over. Questions or comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, we appreciate your comments, and having just received them on May 6th, we'll make sure we provide a written response for the next meeting in full, addressing all your concerns.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be great. All right. Before we go over to Doug Fishman, the RF consultant, any questions from board members on what Liz went over in CPL's memo?
No, I don't.
All right. So, welcome again, Mr. Fishman. I know you did submit 2 separate reports to the board, and based on the applicants responding to the first, why don't you fill us in, not in a lot of detail, but in enough so that we can get a good feeling for what the different issues are and questions that might arise.
Sure. In layman's terms, absolutely.
Yeah.
No problem.
Especially for Fred, yeah.
Okay, thank you for inviting me here. Just to introduce myself formally, Doug Fishman. I've been in the RF engineering field for 30-plus years. Been doing this kind of evaluation work probably for the last 10 years. I've worked with these type of applications plenty of times before, and what I do with my analysis is focus on the RF engineering related aspects of the application. In this case, you're talking about monopole heights, antenna heights, the coverage or capacity requirements of the site, the parameters provided, making sure everything is consistent between the documentation that was provided. So I review the RF justification reports, FCC compliance reports, site plans. Those are probably the big 3 items that I focus on. For this application, I did my initial review back in March, raised some issues. Some of the issues were pretty minor logistical stuff, but the main issues that I had brought up were the propagation modeling and the way they showed the coverage and some of the data behind that. I had asked for some clarifications there. I'd asked for them to look at alternative heights as well, partially to make sure that this is really the minimum height that the applicant needs to do a good job of coverage, because no one wants a second tower in the area. So we looked at that closely. Also looked at the FCC report, asked them to make some modifications in terms of not just looking at ground level, but looking at some accessible rooftops in the area, because the exposure's a little bit gets worse as you move up higher. So I did that. They came back on, I believe it was April 24th, with a revised report, and I provided my analysis of those revisions. In terms of my analysis relative to the propagation studies, I think they did an adequate job of addressing my requests for data. They provided the specific information that I asked for, including the propagation model. The one thing that I had asked for was some kind of evidence that they use drive test data, at least to tune the propagation model. They had not done that. What they did instead was use propagation settings that were consistent with the area that it's in. For this kind of area, which is primarily controlled by terrain and foliage as opposed to man-made structures, I'm comfortable with that. I'm comfortable that what they're showing is a close model of the way it is or is going to be in reality. In terms of the alternative heights, they looked at everywhere from 127 feet up to 167 feet. Again, the top height was 147 is what they proposed. They looked at two frequency bands. One of the bands, the height made very little difference. That was the higher band. The lower band, there were some significant differences, especially as you went from 147 feet to 157 feet. So, my opinion is that the height they proposed is definitely justified in terms of the need of their primary applicant, who's Verizon. And in terms of the FCC study, they did the revised analysis, and the exposure went from 5.6% of the limit to 7.55% of the limit, which is still really low. My conclusion was that at this point, from an RF standpoint, the application is complete. And I'm here to answer any questions the board may have.
Yep, go ahead,
I
Fred.
keep on seeing 150 and 147. Can you explain that to us?
Yes, 150 feet is the height of the monopole itself. 147 feet is where the antennas are.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you.
It's the center line.
Yeah, the center line, which is why, so the top of the antennas is going to be approximately the top of the pole.
And then could you maybe explain in layperson's terms a little bit more about the radio frequency exposure limits and how, what that actually means to people who may live in a neighborhood that's not too far from the tower?
Sure. The FCC has set up these exposure guidelines that limits the amount of energy that the general public can be exposed to from these type of radio emitting sites. Generally, those limits are very conservative and very hard to exceed, because these are relatively low power sites. What's coming out of the antennas, by the time it gets anywhere near where people can access, particularly with poles, it's well below this exposure limit, and they generally do worst case calculations in terms of maximum power and maximum capacity of a site where you virtually never get to. It's much more of a concern when you've got antennas on rooftops where people can access, and that's where generally they put up fencing or barriers to keep people away from the immediate front of the antennas, which is really where the concern is. A site like this where you're up 150 feet in the air, you're not going to be anywhere near that kind of danger.
That begs the question. Liz kind of mentioned some potential changes in design to reduce the visibility. Would any changes in design like that have a significant impact on radio frequency emissions?
So Anything where the antennas are still on the outside of the pole is not going to have any kind of significant impact. If you start looking at solutions where the antennas are inside the pole, it is going to reduce the coverage somewhat, even though these stealth tapped antenna holder things, I'm blanking on the word, they say they don't affect the transmission much, but it does, because you're putting the antennas closer together, you have limited ability to spread out the antennas and get the coverage, so it would make the coverage worse if you do that, and the exposure less, actually.
Well, then in order to have the same coverage, would you then increase the output of the radio frequency and as a result increase the exposure?
It would, if that's a possibility, they would increase it only to the degree where it would match what it would be if it was outside. So all in all, it's not really going to make a difference.
And you mentioned the 147 is the height where the antennas are. Right?
Yes.
So these antennas are the ones that Verizon is going to use.
Yes.
But in the future, if there are other carriers who come along, where will they? I mean, their antennas.
Generally, the separation between carriers is 10 feet.
So they will be 137.
137, 127.
So, so if you are coming down, then the exposure is more.
And each carrier, as they join, has to do their own FCC study with a composite exposure from everybody. So that's part of, I believe it's in the town code as well. So you'll get a study every time there's a change on the tower.
Okay, so the other carriers which are at lower level, they will have to be lesser power, lesser.
As long as the exposure is below the FCC limits, they're okay. So, if everyone is, at, less than 10%, you're still going to be below, even with 4 carriers. Even though you're getting lower, you're still significantly above anything you can access nearby the site. And by the time you're up on the mountain or something, you're far enough away that the signals are much lower.
What do you mean by far? I said a quarter of a mile, a tenth of a mile?
It's part of the predictions that are done, that the signal degrades exponentially as you go out. So once you're a few hundred feet away, you're literally
make a difference. The reason I'm bringing it up is that when we first brought this up, we had people from Carroll Drive, the other people who didn't stay around for this, all right, were very concerned because they do go up the mountain.
Right. Again, generally, if you're more than a few hundred feet away, even if you're directly in the bore side of the antenna, there's no issue.
No, it's a concern.
I think just to add to that,
Sure.
it decreases exponentially the further you move away.
Yep.
I think the maximum exposure typically is around 150 feet or so.
Yeah.
In that area.
Well,
If you're 2, 3, 4, 500 feet away, it goes down significantly.
well, then I have another concern because this is being built next to some people who are going to be working there.
Yes.
On their site. And they're going to be less than 150 feet away.
But they're
Yes.
so much lower down. So the antennas, think of the antennas as like flashlights that you're shining right off towards the horizon. As you get closer to the site, the light is going over your head. It's the reduction is significant as you get closer to the site.
I think to that effect, when you mentioned rooftops, I think the point is, if you can imagine on rooftops, you are able to stand immediately in front of the antennas. And I think we're talking distances of maybe 8, 10 feet, which then would maybe bring it up to a higher level that exceeds the limit. But at 150 feet below, or even at 100 feet below, it's well below the FCC.
In this case, if you looked at the FCC report, the maximum exposure level was like 400 or 500 feet away because it took that long to get anywhere close to the main kind of beam of the antenna. But that maximum exposure was at like 5%.
Yeah, but remember, we're lay people. We don't know what that 5% means.
5% means you're 20 times lower. You're 20 times lower than the limit. So it's significant. It's something that the neighbors don't have to be concerned about.
Is there a limit on the number of antennas that can be on the pole?
The limit is based on the design of the pole.
Okay.
And I guess ultimately the interest in the other carriers for joining the pole. Generally, there's 4 carriers in the area here, right? There are Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Dish.
Optimum.
No, Optimum is not.
No, they actually resell, I think, T-Mobile and AT&T. Yeah, they're resellers. Yeah.
So you're talking about 4 carriers, so the maximum you're going to get on this is kind of 4 sets of antennas.
But I think we also have a theoretical maximum. I think there's a report for 4 carriers in the report.
Right. And that outlined the 4 carriers.
Well, question I'm just asking. If 4 carriers, but like, do they sublease to like, so in other words, if there's 4 sets of antennas, can there be 2, companies on that one antenna for a signal? No.
No.
Okay.
They're dedicated.
Well,
okay.
I mean, I guess theoretically there could. I haven't seen it.
Certainly, Mint, for instance, is a reseller for AT&T, right? I think Verizon has, I'm not sure what the brand name is, but there are resellers that offer different plans to.
Not that I think it's going to, I'm just saying.
Right, but they're not, they're resellers of the primary carrier service. So it's not like AT&T and Verizon share antennas, right? Those are 2 licensee, let's say FCC licensees. Carriers like Boost Mobile, like Optimum, they're not actually transmitting. They're using the main carrier signals.
Yeah, that's what it is.
That's
okay. Yeah,
that's a great way to put it, yes.
Liz, did you have a question?
I do, because I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So the RF report and what you reviewed, is it just for the antennas they're proposing or for all the potential? So theirs plus the 3 below them?
So it's just for theirs, so it's just for Verizon. And if and when other applicants want to join, they have to provide similar data.
To who?
To the planning board.
So, in other words...
Code.
Okay.
You go ahead.
Sorry, that was...
So in other words, when the board approves this, it's approving as shown without the other carriers, and if another carrier, I just want to make sure this is clear to everybody, that the other carriers, the applicant would have to come back to add the other carriers.
Correct.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Just to elaborate a little bit further on that, so if another carrier wanted to come forward and apply to be on this tower, obviously they would have to negotiate at least to be on that tower, but then they would have to apply to this board for an amended approval to allow co-location of their antennas on this existing tower, and they would have to meet the code requirements. And one of those is a structural analysis to show that the tower can handle the weight of their additional equipment.
So just to add to that point, we always design the tower for a minimum of 4 carriers.
Yeah.
From a structural perspective.
Yeah, otherwise.
To plan for
leave
future.
money on the table.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so
That's
so
pretty
the
standard.
question that I have then is, over the last 12 to 14 months, have we received any requests from carriers being added to existing towers?
No.
We never see it.
No, I understand what he's saying, like, we had that one last year. Did anybody else apply to go onto that tower?
Well, the
that
answer
one
is
was
yes.
an effect then.
The answer is yes, there's additional carriers on that tower. I know of it because I'm on the board of directors of that group. But I haven't seen any planning board applications for that.
I don't recall seeing any, and
Yeah,
not
I don't.
quite sure what the process would have been for that
Yeah.
particular tower. That was the Tarpon Towers proposal.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to this town. My history is a little bit limited, only over the last several years. But in other towns, it's frequent that applications are made to co-locate, additional antennas, or sometimes it's a replacement of antennas with newer, better technology. So it does happen as a matter of course.
But I had thought the Tarpon one was it was one set of antennas with levels for co-locators.
And there are more levels now on there.
Oh, so
that's really the question, is what should the process have been, or what was the process at that point when additional antennas were added to that tower?
well, now this law is in effect, so I imagine.
Yeah.
Well, what he just said was that they would have to come back and reapply.
Right.
They're saying if there's additional antennas on there and we didn't see the application, how did they reapply?
Yeah, how did they get?
Don't know. I'm just saying, I guess from here forward, now that we're aware of it, theoretically.
It's a process question, I think.
Yeah, it's a code question, yes.
Yeah, and if another carrier hasn't obeyed the letter of the law, the new law, that's a code enforcement problem with them. All we can do is represent them. We fully intend to comply with the letter of the law, now and in the future.
Thank you.
Do you
So
want,
let me kind of sum up in layperson's language, just to confirm what some of the major results of your studies were. So first, that your findings were that there are significant service coverage gaps in the Route 9 area, and the applicant has demonstrated that there is a need for the proposed tower for coverage reasons.
Correct.
And second, that the proposed tower height of 150 feet has been demonstrated to be appropriate.
Correct.
And three, that the alternative site analysis, I guess we didn't really talk too much about that, but that the alternative site analysis provided by the applicant demonstrates that the proposed site at 73 Route 9 is, and I'm calling it the only viable location to construct the tower.
Yeah, that, I didn't talk about it because that was addressed in my initial report, but their analysis was appropriate.
And four, which we've been talking about, that the RF exposure studies show that radio frequency emissions do not exceed the maximum permissible exposure levels established by the FCC, and there are no areas surrounding the site where the FCC exposure limit is reached or exceeded.
Correct.
It's pretty good for a layperson, isn't it?
It's very good.
Well,
I have one
thank you so much.
question, John.
Go ahead, yep.
Right now, we're at 5G, right? Isn't that the thing, 5G? What if we go, let's say 3 years now, all of a sudden 10G comes out?
Probably want to go 6 first, but yes.
Okay, let's just say 10G comes out.
Okay.
Do they have to, and they would now want to replace their antennas?
Mm-hmm.
They have to come back and give us a new study?
Yep.
Is it every time an antenna gets replaced, we have to do a new study?
I mean, I'll defer to Dominic on this, but I believe it every time.
Yes.
So we have a hailstorm, hail, the size of my cup, and it destroys one of their antennas, it has to be replaced, they have to come and do this again?
Not replaced for just, because it failed, if they wanted to change them out to a newer technology.
And
Yes.
how would we know if one was, say, changing them out or adding new technology? How would we know that?
It becomes a code enforcement issue, right? They need a building permit, associated with that work.
Okay, I think we're missing the question. Maybe I need to rephrase the question. New technology came out 3 years from now, but we all know electronics fail. You could buy a phone today and it fails tomorrow. It had a defect. How would we know if we were not told that it was being upgraded as opposed to being replaced? How would we know that there was a true failure versus we have new technology, we can just go out and exchange them, they look exactly the same, they weigh the same? How would we know that? Through a commercial on television that says now Verizon's offering 10G? I'm being serious, how would we know?
Yeah, if your phone got faster, I suppose, but I don't mean to be facetious, to be honest. I think that there are changes in the structures of these antennas when they go from 3G to 4G to 5G, like the antennas themselves.
I'm not a technical person, I'm just saying I would want to know, like, how do I know we're changing out? Because, yeah, to some people, the RF isn't a big deal, but to other people who are of childbearing age or have health issues or underlying conditions, this is a big thing. And when you don't understand something 100%, it can be a little intimidating and nerve-wracking. And when it goes up in your backyard or within a proximity to your home, where you live 24/7, 365, I can see where it would be an issue. So I would, again, ask the question, how would I know that they're just not doing a standard replacement because something failed, but in fact they're replacing because they're upgrading? And I know you probably don't know the answer, but how would we know that?
Yeah, I mean...
It's 6G on this now, instead of 5G.
Yes.
I want 10G.
They're working actively on 6G. Yes. But if I can just add to that, and I don't want to add anything, but the higher frequency typically just allows for faster transmission, but it is very, very weak. That's why in the plots of the 2100 megahertz, you hardly see any difference if you go from 147 to 167 in height. It's because the transmission is so minimal.
So let me phrase the question to you then. It doesn't fail, we're going to upgrade. Would you have to tell us, would you tell us that you were upgrading? Or would you just do it because you don't?
As a carrier, if I were a carrier, we certainly would have to inform you, absolutely. We wouldn't just change technology without letting you know.
And I think the legal standard is in-kind replacements. So if you're putting up the same, as you're describing, the same antenna again, then that's not the kind of thing you would necessarily have to come back here for.
Agreed.
But if it was another kind of technology, then yes.
How would we know it's the other kind of technology?
I'm sorry, can I jump in? We wouldn't know if somebody wants to, just blindly, just try to fool us, right? I think, I know where you're going, Jody, but if some company wants to just fool us, they could probably fool us, right? I mean, they could just put up something and say, it's the same thing, just looks different. They could do that. I doubt these giant companies are going to want to try to do something like that and put themselves in jeopardy for saving a few $1,000s, on coming back to a planning board. So what I'm saying is, yes, anybody can fool us, but the question is do we really think that's what these companies are going to do? And I doubt it. I mean, if the liability that they will put themselves in would be much worse than just putting up an antenna, and the cost doesn't make sense for them. So I think anybody can fool us, Jody, right? You know, but...
Well, I just,
You know, I'm just
listen,
saying, we're asking a question, anybody can fool us. You buy a car, you don't know what's in the engine, you know?
agreed,
I mean,
but
you know, so
people
it
have
can
been,
happen
towns
anywhere.
have been fooled before, Felix.
No, I understand.
So all I'm saying is, I'm asking a question that I think the general population would want to know. How would we know?
And there's no answer to that.
Okay, there's no answer.
Well, part of the answer also is based in our code enforcement office, the building inspector, zoning administrator. And the way our code is set up, it gives that entity quite a bit of authority in terms of making sure that when a change that the code says needs to come to the planning board, comes to the planning board, that it comes to the planning board. If that doesn't happen, we're kind of stuck.
I'm also, if I could just add like a bit of personal experience to personalize, I'm a former municipal prosecutor. I spent a lot of time prosecuting the types of code violations that we're talking about. Building inspectors are very clever, and they're watching a lot, and they see activity, and they start asking what's going on. Does that mean they catch everything? No. Does that mean that that there aren't ways around it? No, but you know, I'm confident that this town has some pretty diligent and capable people working in the building.
Quick question. Okay, so the frequency level that you said, you know, as you get further away and everything else, I know like in other kind of technology and stuff like that, you have like loom meters and stuff like that to read frequencies. Do they have that kind of stuff to actually see what
Yes.
really is emanating from this?
Yes.
And does the FCC constantly update their studies and their...
I wouldn't say constantly, because these rules have been in effect for a number of years. You know, the latest updates were, you know, do include, you know, cellular carriers and take all that into account. How frequently, I can't comment on, but yes, you can read the levels. There's actually apps on your phone where you can see it.
Like, you know, you go somewhere and it says, you know, this is studies from 2015 or 2002 or
Right.
2003. You know, I just kind of curious about that because, like you said, people do have concerns, you know, because there's more and more propagated of this technology, and I guess,
Yes.
I mean, as far as everybody's talking about technology going up, I think the next thing is going to be, everything's going to be on satellite.
10G, 10G.
No, but to get to your point, there are meters where you can actually measure radio frequency. You can measure it right
Yeah.
where we stand, coming from the lights from outside the building. Yeah.
Yep.
Good.
Actual field measurements.
Yep.
What are you doing now?
Oh, we covered quite a bit here. That was a good discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doug, for coming and helping us with all this.
Sure.
Thank you. Very
And,
informative.
I mean, we might come back to some of these things, but I had a couple of points that I wanted to reiterate, especially what Liz had gone over from her memo. One is about the visual resource assessment, which I also noticed that, and I thought it was very well done overall. It was a very good report and very well thought out. But it does not include the evaluation of alternative designs and color schemes that's required in our code and that our planning board had actually requested. So, and that, you know, that might not be the fault of the author of the study because, I mean, they were focusing on the balloon test and what they had to do to get that report to us. But part of that report is supposed to include that additional design element of the tower. So we definitely would like to see a further description of what the alternative designs and color schemes might be and what that would mean in terms of the design of the structure and how it would affect the operation of the structure and all that kind of stuff that we talked about.
We can certainly provide, for instance, a painted as you mentioned, a painted tower to better blend in with the ridge in the background, maybe. But also, what they're using as a simulation, it is very shiny. And what happens if you just leave that, it kind of dulls over time and loses the shine. In the simulation model, they happen to be using a very brand new, apparently, tower.
And again, besides Liz's description of Route 9 as a gateway corridor into the town, which is what our comprehensive plan update has quite a bit of discussion about, we also have to keep in mind this is an industrial area as well. We acknowledge that. And so there might be options that might help the tower fit in a little bit better. We'd like to see what those might be. We understand that some of the stealth technology might not be appropriate there, but we'd like to see at least what types of options there might be and what the ramifications of those would be for both you and for the public.
If I could suggest maybe a painted pole tower, and I just want to add to, Liz referred to this smooth flagpole type structure. What happens with today's technology is that the carriers put radio heads. I'm sorry. The carriers put radio heads behind the antennas, and they're fairly good size. And when you put this structure inside a pole, you'd have to make it really wide in circumference to fit all this equipment. So it would lose the appearance of a flagpole. It would look more like a smokestack or something.
Well, so I guess what I'm suggesting is that we see what something like that might look like, and then from your perspective, what that would mean from its operation. And it may not be something we would, cooperatively decide to follow, but we'd like to see what it would look like.
I mean, what we sometimes are asked to do is provide fake trees, monopines as we call them, and they work well in certain environments when you're, for instance, adjacent to a wooded area or up against a hill. But out in the open, I don't know that they're a very good solution.
Liz, you look like you're about to say something.
I'm chomping at the bit because in the course of reading, hearing what the board has to say and reading a little bit about this, I have a comment that lists a few of these, but I've scribbled a couple out. So I'm looking at page 3, and it's comment 12D, and I'm going to just read it to you, and then I'm going to tell you how I'd like to cross out a few things.
Okay.
So, page 3, item 12D, as per previous comments, alternative or stealth designs may be appropriate at this site, such as a design that would appear to be a monument, comma, a water tower, comma, a fire tower, comma, a silo, etc., a smooth brown pole with antennas inside. The pole is an alternative design worthy of consideration. These and other alternative designs should be presented. But since I've been hearing more about what the applicant's representatives have said and also what the board has said, I would like to say, I believe I had a discussion with a planning board member or two that the monument wouldn't be suitable in this location. It just isn't a fitting thing. It looks almost like a Washington monument, pointy, and it would have the antennas inside. So I would like to cross that one out from that item 12D. I think the water tower and fire tower, what I've seen online, those are items where the antennas could be attached to the outside, so you don't have this issue of trying to cram the antennas inside. Silo, I think, does not fit in this area, so I would cross that one out. This just isn't an agricultural area. And then originally I had described a smooth brown pole with antennas inside. However, I've also seen, as I described before when I was driving on Route 28 in Woodstock, it's a brown pole, and the top part is green, and the antennas are painted green, but there aren't these fuzzy branches. So it's that, you know, what's the word I want? It's not a shiny paint, it's matte.
Muted.
It's like a
Muted.
muted or
Muted.
matte finish.
Supposed to be like camouflage.
Right, so you still would have the antennas, but I guess they would be green, depending on the height of it. So that's one that I think is worth showing. And then I'm trying to see what else.
But the
Those were the main ones, and so now, I don't know if the board has ones that they want to throw out
Let
or
me
add.
interject with a follow-up
Okay.
question, because what I'd like to start with, and obviously we don't want the process to go on and on and on, but could we see some photographic representations of what these suggested possibilities that Liz outlined are? And then, once we see those, maybe we say, well, this one looks like it might work on the site. Could you do some computer simulations of this site with that tower? Because I don't think we don't want to spend a lot of time and money on, your money, of
Yeah,
course,
no,
on
absolutely, we can,
looking at
provide-
simulations that are fairly obviously not going to be preferred.
We certainly can provide photos and then accordingly simulations if you prefer to that effect.
Yeah,
But just one question on the fire tower, what exactly is that?
Hang on,
Aren't those usually the top of the ridges?
hang on.
There's one in Phillipstown, which is right below. If you're coming from 301 from the Taconic Parkway towards Cold Spring, you will see a fire tower.
Yep.
Which has a lot of antennas in it, but it's really a mountain and a wooded area, and I don't know how high that one is.
Where is that?
301.
On 301.
It's
Between the
I don't know, it's in
Taconic
mountains,
and
but you can see it when you're coming from
Yeah,
the
okay.
Taconic Parkway towards Cold Spring on 301. You look up and you see the gigantic fire tower. I know it's not a fire tower anymore, we don't use them, but it's there and it has the antennas.
Was that an existing fire tower? Was that what you're saying?
No, I never remember seeing that.
Okay. No.
In all the years I've been down there, no.
I'm just saying, I'm just thinking of from their perspective, like, you know, you're talking about different cost structures. Because, you know, if you're just building a flagpole or you're trying to build something that looks like a fire tower, that's a lot more construction.
It's a lot more construction.
Yeah, I'm just,
Well, the entire
I'm
objective
playing in the middle
seems to
here.
be-
Understand.
The entire objective seems to be to make sure that it blends in to the Route 9 corridor in
Right.
conjunction with
Aesthetic
what our
value.
requirements are as part of our plan. The other thing I think Liz brought out, which is very valid, given the fact that I drive through next to the Tarpon Tower almost every day, is the landscaping associated with covering the bottom infrastructure around that tower, because it is heavily industrial looking. Everybody's focused on what you see up 150 feet from far away, but when you get close to that tower and drive around the fence, I mean, I'm 5 feet away from the fence when I drive by that other tower, and that's industrial. So
In this case, I think
It's also
we
industrial.
have one advantage as to how we, that works for us, because we, on both sides, on two sides, we have fairly large commercial buildings.
Yeah.
And as Liz had pointed out, along Route 9, we have these white pines that are still fairly young.
Pretty hefty
Yeah.
cover, I think if you
That
described
cover
it.
is
Yeah.
very-
Because I think the
very
bottom,
wide.
yeah, is fairly well concealed, I think, from Route 9 corridor.
It just
I
would
thought
have to
you were
be
also
kept
putting
and
it behind
restricted.
the building too, weren't you?
I'm sorry?
You were putting your tower behind the
Yeah.
building.
Yeah.
So
in
the
between,
building
so,
on the
yeah.
bottom is covering
Yes.
the basic.
The only thing
What,
you're going to
20
see
feet?
is the tower and the antennas.
Yeah, so it's covering the basic 20 feet, probably.
Yeah, probably 35
the
feet.
fence.
Or 35, whatever it is.
Yeah.
generator.
So that's really covered it already, unless you're coming from the woods side. And if you're coming from the woods side, you're trespassing.
From the quarry side, you probably, yeah.
Yeah.
You're right, it is covered. The idea is to make sure it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
That was the concept, was like, it's already there, put some lines around it, put some notation, make it so that it can't be removed.
We'll absolutely.
Make the site look a little nicer, so.
And then, I know, Liz, you had raised some other things in there, so the memo gets into some really good details, but one of them that struck me was the retaining wall. We really need to see a little bit more detail on the retaining wall, because it's not clear what that's really going to look like and be like.
Should address that.
Yeah. And then when the board's ready, I wanted to go back to page 6 and just walk through
Yeah.
procedural aspects.
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so I'm referring to page 6 under seeker/procedure, comment number 26. I'm just going to walk through it, but I need to come back to something because something has changed. The recent application submittal may be sufficient for the planning board to consider taking the following steps. Acceptance of the application is A. B is referral to the following agencies for review: Town of Fishkill Zoning Board of Appeals, Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development, New York State Department of Transportation, Rombout Fire Company, and Town of Phillipstown Planning Board and other agencies. And then I talk about initiation of seeker, classification of the project as an unlisted action, with the planning board intending to act as lead agency, and circulation to the involved and interested agencies noted above. Just quickly, I want to go back. I was operating under the assumption that because the zoning tables on the plans aren't absolutely clear and complete, so I understand that there is an application to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I think it would be helpful to see that, and also that it might have to change depending on how they're measuring their setbacks. I think I can ballpark say that there's some 0 lot lines in the back of the enclosure, because they come right up against the lot line. But there's probably a front yard setback and a side yard setback that are okay. So I think there's a side and a rear one that are 0. So anyway, I don't know all of the variances, and again, I still don't have a complete zoning bulk table on the plans. So I don't know how that works procedurally, if we can say to the Zoning Board of Appeals, can you hold up until I don't know how that works.
May I add to what Liz?
Please, yeah.
Under consideration is a question of, can we, declare intent to be lead agency and then circulate to interested and involved agencies, and also the other agencies that you've referenced. And I think that would be helpful in terms of getting doing that now to get everybody's feedback. These agencies may even have additional comments that this board would find helpful in terms of evaluating things like, what should the stealthing look like? What if there is stealthing, or the painting. So I would sort of echo this idea that it's a good idea to circulate notice of intent to be lead agency now.
Yep, I had that on my list. So yeah, the two things we just talked about, one is the acceptance and referral that we didn't do completely at our previous meetings, and now I think we can do that. And secondly, the classification of the action under seeker and our intent to be lead agency, and get that circulation notice going. So why don't we get right to those things and then see if there are any other comments or questions that people have. So first, let's see if there's a motion to accept the Homeland Towers application and refer it to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development, New York State Department of Transportation, Rombout Fire District, and Town of Phillipstown Planning Board. I'm leaving out the ZBA for now because we don't normally refer that specifically as a referral to the ZBA, but we'll get to that as a potential involved agency when we do the seeker notification. So is there a motion to the effect that I just said?
So moved.
Felix moves it, Fred seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so the referral carries 7-0.
Debbie just informed me that the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development, actually, she told me this before and I forgot, doesn't accept seeker circulations for this kind of thing.
Okay, so that referral that I mentioned is not the seeker referral.
No, I know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad you know that. That referral is simply our standard referral, which will go through the GML referral to the county.
Yep.
So the next motion then is, and first of all, I just wanted to, so Liz and John have indicated that this probably can be classified as an unlisted action under seeker. Dominic, do you
I agree.
with that? So this would be a motion to classify this proposal as an unlisted action and propose that the planning board serve as lead agency to conduct a coordinated review and circulate a notice of intent to involve an interested agencies, which in this case would involve the ZBA, but not the county. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Felix moves it. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Fred seconds it again. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that carries 7-0. And then I actually had one more kind of procedural question to just raise, and I don't know if this would be the time to do anything, but we had the cooperation of the applicant to toll the shot clock. That's expired as of April, I don't know if it was 10th or 11th, one of those days.
April 11th.
April 11th. And so we're now in the regular shot clock again.
Yes, I calculated that there are 101 days left on the shot clock.
Right, I think it takes us somewhere into August. I'm not quite sure of the exact date, but yeah. I guess my basic question is, would it be prudent to do something about that tonight, or should we let the process move on a little bit further and see how things go, and then discuss with the applicant the possibility in the future of further tolling?
Mr. Kenny, when he acknowledged the extension back in January, said in writing that they would, of course, work with the board and agree to further extensions if necessary, which he specified, if it looked like the time was going to run out. So it seemed as though, taking from his message, that they would be willing to grant further tolling of the shot clock, if you will, if it appeared necessary at the time.
I think we would. It's 101 days out or thereabouts, so
Correct.
maybe, I'm sure as that date gets closer, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you, we love having you here, but do you anticipate that Mr. Kenny will be back before the board soon?
I anticipate he'll be back. He'll be a bit bleary-eyed. He's doing a lot of diaper changing right now and complaining a bit about it.
So he probably will be back soon.
Yeah. He'll be back and actually glad to be here.
All right.
I mean, if I may, it would seem that, the board took a very important step tonight in circulating for lead agency that will, as well as doing the other referrals, will invite comment back from the interested and involved agencies. The project also, requires variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals. The applicant is free to make that application at any time that they so choose.
I think we set to appear before them on the 21st.
So they already have, so I apologize for not being up to speed on that. But it sounds as though the next step would be for the applicant to take into consideration the comments that were made by the board tonight and possibly submit additional revised plans for the board to consider. Given the fact that the shot clock is running, I mean, it would seem prudent to make that submission as soon as possible so that the board can consider it, in a timely manner. I mean, there's there's pressure on the board as far as the shot clock is concerned, but there's also, an obligation on behalf of the applicant to be responsive to concerns and questions that are raised by the board, in my opinion, as part of that. So the board and the applicant may want to consider, placing this on the next month's agenda for consideration of any comments that come back as a result of the circulation, but also if there are revised plans or responses to comments at that time. The board's going to have to, the next large procedural hurdle for this application will be, in my opinion, setting a public hearing. And you'll certainly want to do that before it gets close to the shot clock running out.
Yeah, and exactly. I was actually going to respectfully request that the board consider doing that tonight, based on some of the things that have been discussed tonight. We're talking about the design, what it's going to look like, its visual impacts, in particular upon Carroll Lane. And I think that the Carroll Lane residents have been shown interest and maybe given some comments. And I'm thinking that if the public hearing were open, they would be able to come in and have their comments heard on the record, and then addressed and incorporated.
Well, let's see. The deadline for submissions for the June 13th meeting is May 29th. So first, let me just ask whether that sounds like a reasonable time frame to respond to, all the things that we raised tonight. It's a good bit, but, it might be doable. I don't know. But I guess I'd also look back over to Dominic to just see what you think. I'm a little uncomfortable with scheduling the public hearing at the point where we only have just authorized the sending out of the lead agency intent notice.
I agree. I think it's, at this point, like, you don't have the benefit of having any comments back, but also the board, in an effort to minimize the impacts of the project on the town and on the surrounding neighborhood, have asked for the applicant to provide some additional information. I would think that information would be necessary in order for the public to be able to comment on the project as well, so that they should have that information in front of them. So it would seem more appropriate that if they make another submission that's responsive to, the concerns that have been laid out tonight, then they might be very well close to a public hearing at that time.
And if I can just say, what I've tried to do with this, because I think I do this with just about every application, is to try to put on the table or put the ball in their court anything that needs to be addressed per the code and seeker. So I think that is here in the memo for now,
Yeah.
and the input from the board about the various types of camouflage.
Right. And we thank you for that. So, any other questions from board members, or anything, Doug, that you wanted to add?
No, just, as far as some of the camouflage suggestions, they're all valid, and, I've been involved with many applications where they provide, very good photo simulations of what they may look like from different angles, and, give you a chance to, make a decision on which way to go.
And to that point, it will be important to get the response or the input from the Carroll Lane residents to such camouflaging.
Good. All right. So unless you have any other questions or things you wanted to bring up, I think we'll be all set for tonight.
Okay, so we're adjourned to the next monthly meeting.
Yeah, and it will certainly help if you meet the deadline for submission.
May 29th.
I think we'll hold off on confirming that there will be an agenda item until we, see what materials you're able to submit. And we typically don't exactly react well to piecemeal submissions, so it's really pretty much a matter of going through Liz's full memo and all the things we discussed tonight and trying to address all those things in one new package.
We'll certainly attempt to do that.
Yeah, this submittal was pretty hefty.
Pretty hefty, yeah.
It was, so.
All right. Thank you very much for coming.
It's been nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
And thanks, Doug, for coming in. Yes, you too.
We'll see you on the next time.
Yeah.
It's just habit, right? I do the same thing.
All right. I think if anyone has to take a short break, do it individually, and we'll keep the meeting going so we can move things on.
I want to go ask.
I don't have the pleasure
Oh, so this wasn't an official break, so let's not all wander around. 1, 2, 3, 4. We still have a quorum.
Wait, is he awake?
Yes, I am.
All right, so we are going to move on to the next item, so let's not take too long a break. We're not really taking a break, okay?
I hope you're not directing it to me.
Well, I was kind of looking at Liz as she was walking out the door.
You still have a quorum, though.
Yes, we have a quorum. That is true.
But we need Liz.
So, okay, so the next item on the agenda is Fishkill Self-Storage, Route 9D, Site Development Plan and Special Use Permit. Board to review the DEIS, Draft Environmental Impact Statement that the applicant's representative submitted on March 27th, 2024, and to make a determination whether to accept the DEIS as adequate with respect to its scope and content for the purpose of commencing public review. So I was going to ask Liz to start going through the material she submitted, but we will have to wait a moment to do that. Let's see. Let's get organized here. So maybe, Dominic, since you are here, I was at some point going to ask you just to kind of run through, the seeker legal aspects of where we are and, what we need to do tonight to move this along.
Yes, the applicant, had prepared and submitted a proposed draft environmental impact statement. I say proposed because it's not a draft environmental impact statement until it's been accepted by the board as being sufficient to commence a public review. The purpose of the board's review at this point is to evaluate whether or not the applicant has addressed the items and analyses that are required for this particular application that were set forth in the final scope. So that's the focus of the review at this particular time. It's not whether or not you agree with the analyses necessarily, or whether or not it's sufficient, to grant approval, but whether or not the applicant has provided sufficient information to address the items that were contained in the scope, in the final scope. Seeker regulations provide that the board should provide its comments to the applicant within 45 days of making initial submission, and so you are within that time frame. Bear in mind, however, that there's no default approval if you miss that time frame, but we do, make every effort to meet the time frames as required. And so that's really where we're at. I know that Liz has a detailed memorandum identifying, which was very helpful because it went through the scope itself, so you could follow along in the scope as to areas where, in her opinion, she felt that the application and the efforts either met or did not meet at this stage the requirements set forth in the scope. And that's pretty much where we're at procedurally. If the board agrees, then you would deem the application, or rather the DEIS, to be incomplete, insufficient at this time. Liz also prepared a draft resolution for you for that effect. And then the next step would be for the applicant to revise the proposed draft EIS and resubmit, and we go through this process again. The difference is that the board would have 30 days rather than 45 days to review subsequent drafts.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Liz.
Dominic.
No, that's all right.
Sorry.
It's the kind of stuff that puts my wife to sleep at night.
So Liz, why don't you go through your materials?
Out of boredom.
I would say in a summarized form.
Yes.
So I know a lot of your comments are very specific and detailed in terms of, kind of format or additions that are very clear. Others are a little bit more substantive, so why don't you use your judgment and see how quickly you can take us through it, but not at the expense of missing things.
Right. So Dominic pretty much covered the procedural things that I'd spoken about in the memo. Thank you. And I really, I think the areas that are incomplete stand out, so I don't want to touch on the minor ones. And so I just dog-eared a few pages, and I'm going to just touch on a few things, and I'll try to walk you through that. So I'm looking at the annotated outline, and the annotations, of course, are in red. Hopefully you have color copies. And I'm looking at the top of page 10. There's a comment under purpose and benefit, talking about the public need or public benefits. That's under number 2. Number 3, the site's topography needs to be described. Down at the bottom of that page, number 5, we need a description of existing environmental features, topography. And then I'm going over to page 11, item C, building design, and this one indicates that the figures, there should be a reference to the full-scale site drawings and figures 1-9A and B, and clearly show the building's door locations. That's why I wanted those inserted back in there. There are a couple of other minor ones on page 11. But down at the bottom, existing zoning and detailed zoning compliance data, there isn't sufficient existing zoning information or detailed zoning compliance data for the proposed buildings and related improvements and for signs. And then I note that in Chapter 2, page 2-11, Table 2.1 shows that, and so I'm suggesting they add reference from this chapter so that somebody can just jump to that and they don't have to repeat it there. That's the idea, anyway. Bottom of page 12, this talks about land use. This is in Chapter 2A, land use section, and at the bottom of the page, there's an item, 1, the proposed action is inconsistent with the local zoning regulations, and what I've written in red is that it briefly mentions the Beacon it mentions inconsistency with the regulations in RB or R15 zoning districts. But it doesn't state that the self-storage use is not allowed, and I think that's an important point to make early in the document. And then that continues to the top of the next page. I think it's worth listing in this section the stated intent of what uses are allowed in RB and R15. On page 14, we need to know the zoning in the quarter-mile land use study area, and that does include some zoning districts in City of Beacon's code, Rs 1-7.5 and R1-40, so that should be elaborated upon. And the bottom of that page, again, talks about inconsistency with zoning regulations, but should state that the self-storage use isn't allowed. On page 15, this is about covering the full discussion of the core issue in this, which is that a request is being made under zoning section 150-19-1B, and it doesn't address the order of restrictiveness that's in there, so I give the citations for zoning sections 150-8, 150-12, and 150-13, which are defining aspects of the analysis in 150-19B, which is, again, the core application in this project. And then I'm going to skip over to page 16, and this has to do with community plans. And there's a narrative on page 2-18 about the comprehensive plan update, the CPU, adopted in 2023. But there were a couple of items that weren't covered in here, which I think are pretty core items of the CPU. So it's the CPU's vision statement, and CPU section B, promote good design of the built environment, mixed land uses, etc. And then again, there's an incompleteness under community plans having to do with the intent of the Route 9D gateway entrance and gateway corridor and the Trail of Two Cities. It can't be fully evaluated lacking a photographic image of the site's existing and proposed full frontage as viewed from either side of Route 9D. And what happened is I was looking through the document and I was looking at the various photographic images in the visual impact analysis, and there's a view from the north, from a pedestrian crosswalk, kind of looking southeast into the sort of the corner of the site, and then there's another one looking from the south, looking along the frontage, but there isn't one as if you're, say, across the street on that sidewalk walking, looking right into the site. There is a photo somewhere in the document where it looks like there's a cropped portion of that view used in another illustration, but it isn't the full view. So that was a central thing, and that comment gets repeated in a few places, so I won't repeat that again. And then on page 17, I'm referring to other issues in the comprehensive plan update that should be covered, that weren't included in the submitted DEIS. Again, it's CPU's vision, and I've emphasized enhanced diversity of the local economy, focus on the needs of community in the region. And again, this is in community plans, by encouraging mixed-use walkable development in areas that have already been developed. Promote good design of the built environment, etc. So those are repeating in two places, but because they pertain to those two sections. On page 18, again down at the bottom, this has to do again with the lack of an image presented in reference to that section that's a straight-on view of the site. And that would be a straight-on view and then a simulated view. And let's see. That same point about the lack of that photograph and the lack of analysis of the views is repeated again on page 20. And then in addition, that comment from the bottom of page 20 continues, and there's a request that there should be additional images provided for full evaluation of visual and aesthetic impacts, and that would involve a photographic image and simulation as seen from inside the residential neighborhood on Van Ness Road, and that was something that Jonathan discussed with me, and also a drone view of the site from New York State Route 9D. In other words, you're slightly up, I guess, not maybe like aerial photography, but you're slightly up so you can sort of get the bigger picture from above. And then at the top of page 21, the impact narrative talks about the design guidelines, but it doesn't address the original general Section 150-144 regarding the purpose and intent of the design guidelines, and that's pretty central to land use and aesthetic and all that. I'm going to skip the one on the bottom because it's a repeat of lacking that full-on image. And then on page 24, in the middle, incomplete DEI, section D9, page 621 merely discusses placing a no U-turn sign at the Van Ness Road, but doesn't include any analysis done to evaluate the potential impact of vehicles entering Van Ness in spite of a no U-turn signage. And again, that was one that Jonathan had brought up when we had a discussion about this. And so that's a summary of the big points and some of the repeated points. That's all I would want to cover, Jonathan, unless you think there's something else.
No, I think you covered the main things. See if there are any questions from board members about that. And also just, before we go on too far, to get a sense of, based on Liz's points in her outline, whether the board agrees that we're basically looking at an incomplete EIS that's going to need some more work before we can circulate that to the public.
Sure, definitely looks like we need more work on this for sure.
Based on what Liz is saying, it certainly requires more work, but are there any shows? I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with the term showstoppers.
Of course.
But are there any things in here that are really not allowed based on existing code?
Well,
meaning what?
Meaning are any of these issues that we cannot overcome? Or are all of these things that with some mitigations they can be addressed?
I'll look to Liz and Dominic.
yeah, we don't know that yet. That's part of the reason that we're doing this analysis. So there's two things going on. One is this analysis that's a very unusual chunk of zoning that allows somebody to come in and say, hey, we want to do this use. We're not allowed to do it in this zone, but there's this sort of 4-point thing that we can try to provide rationale for why it might be acceptable. And in the board examining it and initiating seeker review, it was determined that there were potentially significant impacts, and that's why we're pursuing a draft environmental impact statement. So right now, we're at the stage of determining whether the DEIS is adequate or inadequate, or complete or incomplete. In other words, has the board been provided in this draft environmental impact statement all the information that they need to be able to start deciding whether they agree or disagree, or feel that the rationale has been presented that's convincing or it's not convincing? In other words, right now it's just about, do we have enough info and the correct information? And when you get to the point where we have an EIS in our hands that is complete, and the board makes that determination down the road, then after that, you walk into the next phase of seeker review, which is to say, what do you think about it, and whether you agree or not, or whether you're convinced or not, the rationale that's presented and the evidence that's presented to try to convince you whether or not the use could be done according to 250-19B. I know I've just blathered terribly, but the point is, right now we don't have enough information. We don't know if there are showstoppers. Does that?
Yeah, at the end of the day, and we're not there yet, the board is going to have to make various different findings as to whether or not this project, warrants a special permit for a use that's otherwise not allowed in the zone. But that's a separate process that comes at the very end of the whole review. what's going on now is the environmental review, where you're evaluating various different environmental impacts associated with the project, and also ensuring that there's sufficient information that's enables the public to be able to comment on the fullness of the project. And that was what the scope was for. And now the document is being compared against the scope rather than being compared on the substance as to whether or not it's going to get a yes vote or a no vote or whatever, at the end of the process.
Does that answer your question, Kevin?
Yeah, the two things that came out of me was the zoning question. The question is this particular usage allowed in this? And I think your 4 points that we're going through will help us make that determination. But at least at this particular point in time, it says the answer is no, right? But we're working on it.
The answer is we don't know because we don't have enough information.
We don't know, but from a code point of view, it says unless we can satisfy these conditions, it's not allowed. So that's number one. Number two is really the overall intersection of this particular kind of usage with the CPU. And that's not really a showstopper, but it says that we really have a lot of other concerns here associated with the implications that we discussed when we approved the CPU and the implications of this matching our visions that are incorporated in the CPU. So those are the two things that I think were, forgive me for trying to sum up perhaps a bit early, but at least this is a fairly difficult series of discussions that we're going through, looking for reasons as to why this should be a benefit to the community.
And it's really up to the applicant's folks to put that
Well, yeah, I mean,
board's
you
lap.
may recall, a few months ago, John, you asked me what I thought of this, and I said, I just want to do what's right for the community. And the question at that point was, do we need another self-storage in a particular area like this?
And that's hopefully what this environmental impact statement will help the board decide once it's complete, based on all the comments that we just went over. So, welcome, Mr. Werner, and
figured I'd just stay here.
see if you have any thoughts or questions or comments at this point.
A little, sure. Aaron Werner, AKRF, on behalf of the applicant, prepared the EIS draft. Ali Fausner from Cutting Faders here as well, filling in tonight. So we have the comments. We're going to respond. A couple of requests. One, can we have permission to communicate with your consultants? Because I know when we got the comments, we were told we can't, but I'm hoping tonight I can get on the record the request so we can as we work through these.
Yeah, so we can...
In addition to what I might bring up tonight.
We can do a motion.
And then secondly, as far as a format for how a response should look, when we submitted this preliminary draft in March, it was 10 hard copies, quite a bit of printing. Maybe for this round, we show the changes redlined for those chapters that changed and submit only those, rather than going to the full printing job again.
What would your suggestion be, Liz?
Yeah, I honestly hadn't considered it because I'm going to be looking at the whole, I would assume there's going to be e-copy with the entire thing.
Well, we could have a PDF of the whole thing with changes, but as far as hard copies, can we just submit the red line chapters?
It's really kind of, I mean, I'm assuming that the hard copies are so that the board members don't have to review on screen.
That's not exactly true.
Yeah, I don't know that we need that many copies for the board, but we need some, like me. This is what I use.
Right.
Right.
And I put a lot of
What
flaggy
we
things in
require
there.
upfront,
It's a
preference.
clarification is what I always request.
Yeah, I
for
think
every submittal.
if a board member is, I guess if a board member has a preference for the hard copy, I guess I would think they probably should have the whole thing. unless whoever, unless you're comfortable inserting with instructions.
I guess
But
the only
it's-
real question is for formatting of, so that the board and our consultants can easily see where the revisions have been made and how the comments in Liz's document were addressed. That would be one format. And then
Okay.
the second format would be then, a completely revised EIS in both PDF and several hard copies, however many Debbie, decides is necessary. Does that sound reasonable?
I think what we
That's a
would
great idea.
plan to do would be responding, we could even respond within this marked up scope with our responses and then
Yeah.
direct you to what pages, a different color, yep, and direct you to what pages the changes were made on, and we can submit that behind it, the actual revised pages.
Yeah.
Or, but if you're thinking you need 10 binders again, yeah.
How many, Debbie?
I don't think we need 10. I mean, it's up to the board.
How many board members would
Desire. I know
like
the
to
chairman
go?
likes a hard copy, but I
One,
can't speak
two,
for anybody else.
3,
I want a hard copy.
4,
Save the tree.
Just be aware when I get them, we all have to come pick them up. I cannot mail
If a
them.
board member needs them, you should have them.
Absolutely.
and this will again still be before it's accepted
Correct.
Right.
by the board,
Right.
assuming everything is done
Once it's accepted, there's
the way
a bunch of copies.
we wanted it.
Right.
At the, next, after the submission, at the next available meeting, then the board would make its determination at that point,
Yeah.
whether we would accept it or not. And then, that's when we would
Then there's a
need,
whole bunch of copies.
Yeah, and we're
yeah.
prepared for that, just for the completeness rounds.
Yeah.
Sometimes it seems wasteful to
Yeah, yeah.
do that over and over again, so.
yeah.
So we're looking at like 4, you said?
I think if you do 5, because I'm going to need one for the file.
Yeah, just
That's
have
no
5
problem.
hard
Yeah.
copies.
5 sounds good.
And then, of course, the electronic. on
So 5 hard copies of the full document, even pages that aren't changed, you're saying?
Yep.
That's what you
Is that what we're asking?
Yes.
Well, I mean, okay. Okay.
What, or, so I guess the alternate question would be, which would be a little bit difficult, but to have just the pages that are going to be revised, but by the time you do that, you're going to have different page numbers and different
To keep
sequencing.
it clean, John, I would go with
Yeah.
the way it's been
Yeah.
proposed.
Yeah, okay.
And the only thing I was thinking was the big appendices that, I don't know.
It's going to be a complete document. Is that all? If the
Oh, that's
board
true. Yep.
desires to accept that as complete,
Yep.
you still need a
They have to
complete
see it.
document to
Yep.
go with.
Yep, got it.
Well, then, that's the next step. Once
That's
we
right.
accept
Yep.
it as complete, then there will be a whole
Whatever's
new-
easier for the board.
That we understand, but
So
for this
5.
stage,
I
I'm
just wanted to
wondering,
make sure Debbie understood that.
I do.
Yeah,
I
okay,
do.
good.
Whatever's easier for the board to keep it all together for them, that's what you do.
Okay.
okay, so what did we agree to? For the next submission, we can do just the pages that are changing based on these comments?
No, I
No.
think,
I thought the entire document.
No.
Entire document, okay.
So 5 copies of the entire
5
new
copies.
document.
With the changes.
And the changes, the further annotated changes on something like this with yours in, in blue or some other.
Pointing to
color.
what page to look at for the changes?
Yeah.
Sure, okay. All right, so then can we talk about a couple of these comments?
and then just, I'm assuming the e-copy would be one.
Yeah, soft
Okay.
copy.
Got it.
Except an e-copy.
Yep, that's
Soft
great.
copy is the
Yep,
default.
got it.
Okay. Well, all right, so I'm looking at page 12, the bottom of page 12, where it's the first time it's brought up about how we don't explicitly state that the use is not allowed in the RB or R15. I think that what we were trying to portray was that while it's not listed in the list of uses in both of those districts, it is, by this code provision, the planning board has the authority to issue a special use permit. So we can reword that accordingly. But I guess my attorney's here too and can state that plain out saying that it's not allowed without mentioning that is not what we want to do.
Are you on The bottom of page 12?
Yes. Briefly mentions inconsistency with zoning regulations, yet never states the fact that the proposed self-storage use is not allowed. I think we do acknowledge it, but with the caveat that with the special permit under 150-19B, it is.
I think, to clarify, it's the use is not otherwise allowed in the zone, except for function of this special permit provision, which says there is particular criteria, that the board evaluates, and there's a process. So I think perhaps just rephrasing that might satisfy that particular.
That's what we'd
I
like to do.
understand. We're like looking at two sides of the same coin, but I think it's, how it's phrased is the issue.
Sure. Then on the comp plan comments, I guess we'll start with what you have on page 16, where you have these certain vision and goal statements underlined. We just want to get it right, so I guess the question is, are these the ones that you want us to focus on? Are there any more besides these? Because, the scope is pretty vague, and it says outline relevant goals, objectives, and recommendations. We hit on ones that we thought were.
So, yeah. The comment is meant to say what you hit plus these.
Okay, thank you. As far as the photographs, so we have two views, right? One from the northwest corner-ish, looking southeast. It's like, these are views 13 and 14 in the document if you want to look at them. The reason that we did it from an angle in both directions, one from like the southwest corner looking northeast and from the northwest corner looking southeast, was that the site has a lot of frontage. Taking a photo from directly across would just capture like a piece of the lot, whereas going from an angle, we wanted to show the entire frontage from both perspectives and the landscaping that's proposed, the building behind it. We're comfortable with doing another view straight on. It might just be limited to showing you like what it looks like at the entrance and the buildings there, the landscaping's there. Similar to what if you want to go to chapter 4's figures. I have them on a USB if it would be helpful to pull it in. Am I allowed to do that?
Is that not the document?
It is, yeah, but I
Go
can.
ahead and,
Okay, thanks.
I can't let you put a USB and I'll get fired.
Got it.
We don't want
Fire
that.
myself.
We don't want
I was
that.
going to say, wouldn't that be you?
Like, for example, like this rendering, the lower right image, oops, sorry. Lost it. We would have a simulation that shows more of that from like a look straight on from like the driveway. Is that what you're thinking? Because it won't be able to show the full extent unless we have like a panoramic camera, like. You know what I mean? It's a lot of frontage there.
Let me tell you what I observed. So what I did was I went on to Google Earth Street View just to get an idea of what was the span of that. And I understand why you took those views from those two angles, but there's like a middle view that would be helpful. I'm not expecting you to show the entire frontage, but to be able to simulate it so that you kind of have between those two views way on the ends and something in the middle, you have an idea of what you're going to see.
How about this photo? This is a leaf-off photo from looking straight in at the existing gravel drive that gets you into the property. We could use that perspective and show the simulation from that.
I think that could work. I don't know exactly where that's from, but yeah, I mean, when I'm moving up and down the frontage and looking at those, that's kind of the hunk that's missing.
Yep.
I'm wondering what you would see from that spot.
You're looking directly into
Yeah, I'll show
kind of
you
the middle of the
difference.
site.
So, right now we have, I'm going to go to the chapter 4. Bear with me here.
That's just past Van Ness on the right.
The one, there's one where you're like right at Van Ness, sort of looking along the frontage, not necessarily like in.
Yeah.
and then there's another one that's north, and you're at that crosswalk, again, looking diagonally, but you're looking at the very sort of corner tip of the site there. And the reason that I have that sense is because if you're in street view and you go to aerial view, you can go back and forth and see where you're at and where you're looking. And so if I go to the aerial view and I'm looking in the middle of the site and then I jump down to the street, I'm not getting it from either of those corner views. So if we're going to get the full presentation of how is this going to change the look from the street, I think we need that middle view.
Yeah, well, we have
It's
the
very
existing
important.
photo that's leaf off, which is good, so we could.
It looked like you
definitely-
did in other places,
Yeah.
like there was one that was kind of cropped from it, and I thought,
Yep, that was the one that I just had up.
yeah,
So,
and when I was looking at, you know how you have the red arrows showing where you are along the site? And the arrows, I mean, they're just because of the scale of the map where you have those little arrows, you can't really see the angles, but they're kind of oblique angles, and
That's
they're
this
not,
one, yeah.
there's nothing really looking straight on. And
Yeah, we
that's,
can
that's
have
what I
one.
think the board should be able to see, so that you have the full length, more or less. You're not going to get the full length, like you said, because it would have to be a panoramic view, but
Yeah.
between the two on the corners and one
Okay.
in the middle, I think.
Thanks. All right, so moving on then. So I guess the last one would just be about the two additional views that we're asked about. You know, the scope lays out, this is page 20 and 21 of the scope. So page 20 has, page 19 of the scope has the 7 viewpoints that were agreed upon for the visual study.
Right.
There isn't one that says take one from Van Ness Road neighborhood looking north. There is one, we did take one at the Van Ness and 9D interchange or intersection, if you
The
will.
only one I was saying was missing was the one that's bolded, in other words, right?
Right, but then on page 22 or 21, you ask for a view from the Van Ness neighborhood, which isn't in the scope.
That,
A photograph, image, and simulation is seen from inside the residential neighborhood on Van Ness Road looking north.
I understand that.
And I feel like, you know, it's not in the scope, and,
On the other hand, that neighborhood is going to be affected.
right, and we do have a cross-section showing the distance, what's intervening. I just feel like a photograph on that street, we're just going to see the front yards of homes, and homes are kind of close together. We're not going to really be able to see
Then-
anything behind them anyway. It's-
I mean-
The backyard is where you would want to take it from, but that's not public.
Well, of course not. It's not public, and that's why it was suggested that it be taken from the street. I mean, it's going to show, if what you're saying is correct, taking it from some point between yards looking from the street, you should be able to get a view and then do a simulation that is going to show exactly what you're saying.
I just feel like we're not taking trees down in that area, so like what's there, and right now there's a leaf-on condition, so to really, you know, you're going to see the screening that exists now by a photograph, so
And you guys didn't have any photos, like, during prior site work or anything like that?
no, because it wasn't part of the scope.
Right.
So we would have to wait till the leaves are off to really do that.
Does the
right.
board have any strong feelings about that?
It's a long time, we're talking about one picture. I think, let's just move on.
We do have that cross-sectional view of, that shows the distance, that shows all the landscaping we're doing, and honestly, if you look at the screen right here, the image on the right, I can't zoom in for some reason on here, but those are, this is at full maturity of those arborvitae, and we're proposing a similar row of those on the south end, even before the forest. It's between the project and the homes, so that's going to be there, plus the existing leaf-on condition in the photograph. So I just don't see the benefit of even having that in there, aside from the fact that it's not in the scope.
Anyone else have a strong feeling about it? All right, so why don't we scratch
Okay.
that image from Van Ness
All right.
Road?
Thank you.
All right.
And then on the drone, similar, I mean, we're talking publicly accessible vantage points. A drone photo doesn't really represent a person's viewpoint on a typical, going up and down 90 in a car, which is what we tried to show here, walking on the sidewalk, so it will show with the other one. I mean, this also shows a pedestrian view. So a drone view, it's not a publicly accessible. People aren't hovering and looking at sites, so.
Yes.
Not in the scope either.
I find the drone view as being very helpful in terms of taking in totality of not just a specific site, but also that site in where it sits in relation to everything else. So, in fact, usually from a real estate point of view, for example, drone pictures are used to sell specific sites.
I would agree, but
right?
from
But
seekers,
obviously, a drone view is for us, you're not going to get a drone view walking by the site. But
correct.
For us, I think a drone view would, at least speaking for myself, it would be very helpful.
Yeah, I agree
It
with
would have
that.
been helpful if it was scoped that way originally, but,
Understood.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a variation of what the scope indicated. It didn't specify a drone view or a bird's eye view, which is really, I think, what it's getting at, but it does get into the, the frontage view of the whole site. Just happens to be looking somewhat from above, so you get a better sense of how the site fits into the surrounding area. And understandably, it'll be a leaf-on condition, but the drone view will be able to help, see into the site as opposed to the new shot we're adding, looking at straight on, is going to show the entrance, but it's not going to show much of the interior of the site.
right, but that's the view that the public has. I mean, that's the point of seeker impact analysis, the DEC guidance. I'm just trying to, come at it from that angle, too, because we're doing an EIS. We could revisit it, we could talk further. We'd like to request that one also come out.
It's up to the board if you want the drone view or not.
Well, we've got two opinions of
View
keeping
would be a
it.
better view for us than just at the ground level, because if it's just up a little bit, we're going to be over the trees and seeing into the property.
But those trees are going away anyway, the ones that are most of them that are along 90 are going to be gone anyway, and we're showing that in these
Well, that would
renderings,
give us a good view from there, what the people are going to see. Right now, if you just take it from ground level. But if you're up there, we're going to be able to see into it better. When I drive in to it, all right, I got a better view once I get inside than just sticking out on the street.
I mean, I'm assuming what we're talking about is just above, not like you're not at street view, you're just up a little bit, not like aerial, not an aerial view. Like from the top, it's just
Yeah, bird's eye view is what I call it.
like a bird's eye view, sort of.
Well, that does, again, I don't know if it's going to be something to hang us up for everything. It's got that, the picture's not going to be the one that's going to make us decide.
I think
the pictures are very important. I think the pictures are pretty important.
I do too. I do too.
All right, I think we're getting a consensus
Yeah, let's keep-
that we should keep the drone view, put the drone view in there.
Okay, that was all I wanted to really cover tonight then. We'll keep going through these and we'll start on the revisions, and it would be great to be able to communicate with your consultants, and we'll do our best to either be back in June or July on this.
Well, so we do have a resolution, if we're ready to go to that. Liz, if you could just real quickly.
I will try to be very, very quick. This is a resolution of State Environmental Quality Review, determination of inadequacy of draft environmental impact statement, Fishkill Self-Storage Facility 1292 Route 9D, whereas the project is fully detailed as follows. I'm not going to repeat all those bullet points because I think you're familiar.
Don't even repeat one of them.
It's been referred to Dutchess County there at the bottom of the page. It is not a permitted use in the restricted business zoning district, and then it recites the fact that there's this opportunity regarding 150-19B to get a special use permit to try to do the use. And then the next whereas talks about the action that was taken, classified the action, determination of significance, and then the board took the following steps, held a scoping session, accepted scoping comments, adopted a revised scoping outline, and then the middle of the page, preliminary draft environmental impact statement was received March 27th. It's been, the planning board's been assisted in its review, and then it lists the consultants. The consultants have reviewed the submitted DEIS, including, and then it says application materials, et cetera, per the final scope, and provisions of the code and seeker regs about whether the DEIS is adequate. Planning board's consultants prepared the annotated version of the outline, noting incomplete sections. Now therefore be it resolved, the board has reviewed the submitted DEIS March 27, 2024, in accordance with the final written scope, and has considered its consultants' comments and concludes that submitted DEIS is inadequate, incomplete with respect to the adopted scoping outline and corresponding content, and be it further resolved, the board hereby determines, in accordance with the seeker regulations, that the draft environmental impact statement is inadequate with respect to its scope and content for the purpose of commencing public review as set forth in the annotated version of the adopted scope outline dated May 1, 2024, and closed with this resolution. Is that quick enough?
Good summary.
Okay.
Okay, is there a motion to approve and adopt that resolution of state environmental quality review, determination of inadequacy of draft environmental impact statement for Fishkill self-storage, 1292 Route 9D site development plan and special use permit as reviewed and revised tonight? And there's that one revision, deleting that one photograph, and to authorize the chair to sign the resolution.
So moved.
Felix moves that. Is there a second?
I second.
Ravi seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that passes 7-0. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
And then does the board want me to redo the annotated outline according to the discussion tonight, or is it just a matter of the record?
No, it's a matter of record.
Good, okay, good. That's good.
And we will await the revised. Oh, yeah. So, could we have a motion to authorize, so is this going to involve attorneys or no? Because if one attorney's involved, then both have to be involved.
Yeah, it might be safe to if the board sees fit.
All right, so let's have a motion to authorize our consultants, plural, we won't be specific, to communicate with the applicant's team. The one qualification that I always need to mention is that if an attorney from one side is involved in those direct communications, then the attorney from the other side should be as well. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Felix moves it. Is there a second?
Second.
Bob seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that passes 7-0. All right. Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
Better her than Taylor.
All right. The next and I believe final item on the agenda is Basis Industrial Route 9D Site Development Plan and Special Use Permit. board to review the submission made by the applicant's representative on April 24, 2024. Welcome.
Good evening.
Why don't you give us a quick update on the recent submission?
Sure.
And we'll go from there.
All righty, so for the record again, Corey Salomon from Zarin and Steinmetz here tonight on behalf of the applicant. Here with me are Zoe Daniel from Basis, Zach Cam and Corey Chase from Dynamic Engineering, and Chris Michalik from SGW Architects. So as you know, we last appeared before you back in April. At that meeting, your board adopted a neg deck, concluding the secret process. And prior to authorizing your consultants to draft any sort of resolutions, you requested that we address some of the outstanding comments. So our consultants met with CPL to review them, and so we submitted a comment response memo, cut and fill report, revised plan notes, revised architectural, and some sign plans addressing those comments. I think most notably, what we determined was that the basement was included in FAR. So that brings our total FAR from 0.4 to 0.58, so we will need a variance for that. That also drove up our parking count from, I believe, 119 spaces to 156. We're still providing just the 50, so we will need a variance for that as well. But other than that, we think we pretty much addressed, the vast majority of the comments. And so we're here to, go through any outstanding items and hopefully have your board authorize consultants to draft a preliminary resolution for the next meeting.
Do you want to go through any of the details of the submission, or should we go to CPL's memo? And then after we go through CPL's memo, then you could...
I think that would be the easier way to do it, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, John and Liz, why don't you go through your memo?
Okay. So this is a memo of May 7th, and just going to touch on a few points. I'm acknowledging that the neg deck was adopted on April 11th. And also that prior comments summarize the interpretation regarding storage building basement area. I kind of went back to that and indicated that the plan set was properly revised regarding the proposed FAR, indicating the need for an area variance. And again, this is a repeat of what you just said, Corey. The lower level of the proposed storage facility means that this is a 3-level structure, and so the FAR requirement in the general business zoning district is 0.40, and the proposed FAR is 0.58, which exceeds the requirement by 45%. So a variance will be required. And just looking in terms of what is the community ending up with, you have a site that is in need of redevelopment. It's going to be redeveloped. This particular aspect of all of the uses doesn't really need the parking that the zoning says it needs. So I don't particularly have any major concerns about that FAR, and I had thought that it was an issue from the beginning. And I go through a detail of the schedule of zoning requirements just briefly. The drive-through facilities, the required setback is not less than 150 feet from the boundary. It's 133, so it's 17 feet short. And a variance was indicated. It's not a big variance for that. The total number of parking spaces would be 119, and 50 are proposed, which I had said early in the project that probably would be sufficient because of the storage. And regarding the, basically the zoning requirements table indicates that 7 required loading spaces are needed, and there's only 2 provided. There was discussion in prior comments about possibly coming up with shared loading spaces, but that didn't fly. So I guess we need to do some continued coordination of the review of the proposed action with the Town of Fishkill Zoning Board of Appeals. Now, I understand that an application was already made, I believe.
Actually, it was denied for incompletion.
Oh, okay, okay. So Anyway, hopefully we have a more accurate list of what is actually needed. And then I'm skipping down to the bottom of page 2. I feel concerned that the board has put a lot of time and energy and focus and commentary into the architectural plan set. And so what I'm suggesting here at the bottom of the page is that the facades, materials, colors, and color schemes seem to be protective of community character in that gateway corridor area. And so I'm saying a general note should be included on Plan Sheet 5. Refer to the architectural plan set for all architectural features. All it says now is refer to the architectural plan set for all facades, exterior materials, and color, and I don't think that's enough, and I think that should be revised so it actually lists the final or nearly final architectural plans and ultimately the sign plans too. So that notation should be specific and short so that the board ends up, what gets built there is what they worked so hard to comment upon. Let's see. I have a couple concerns in the middle of page 3, and this is regarding the road. And what it kind of boils down to is, I think we need some kind of a definition of what is Pappas Lane. And there are meets and bounds descriptions, so I think like a written description of that lane, how it's encompassed in certain boundaries. So show and label the boundary of the existing easement and provide a copy of the existing easement language, which is referenced in some of the plan notation. So there is an existing easement, and the board should be privy to that. The sign plans, it's acknowledged that we don't have all of the sign plans, so I didn't go into detail on those. But down at the bottom of page 3, it's acknowledged that there are 2 loading spaces, which now, they're on the first floor. They're not in the basement. Before it was discussed that way, or it appeared to be shown that way. So those loading spaces are going to be on the first floor. So the concern there, technically there should have been 5 more loading spaces. So I'm giving instructions at the top of page 4 to indicate there's a waiver where you can deal with 50%, and I think that would cover 2 spaces in the waiver, and the remaining 3 would have to be variances.
Yeah, that was one thing I was just going to comment on. That I'm not sure.
I don't know how you split that
Yeah,
otherwise.
I'm not sure that
2.5.
since variances are going to be needed, that, the planning board does 2 and the zoning board does variances for the others. I think it should probably just go to the zoning board.
Have all of it go to the zoning board.
I mean, that's my
That's a
opinion,
good
but-
idea. And so it would be a variance for 5.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes good sense. Thank you, Jonathan. And then, bottom of page 4, the planning board definitely expressed concerns about blasting. And so, the top of page 5, I'm making some recommendations about how there is still some plan notation in there that seems to allude to blasting, and that needs to be kind of straightened up so that it's very clear that blasting isn't part of this approval, or that's my understanding from what the board has expressed. And so what I'm suggesting is some changes to make it clear no blasting is allowed, and to say how rock removal would be done, and the plans get approved that way. And then later on down the road, if it's determined that blasting is needed, then the applicant would come back and get an amendment from the planning board. So they have other methods of rock removal, hammering, ripping, whatever that they've described. I just want the notation to be clear so that during construction there isn't a question mark. Is that okay with the board?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I think later, when and if we talk about a preliminary resolution, that blasting provision should go in there too.
Okay. And then we get down to engineering. There were 7 comments left in the engineering review that remain to be addressed. And the traffic comments?
So,
Oh, go
am
ahead.
I seeing things, or are 15 and 16 the identical points?
Yes, the same one twice.
Yeah, look at that.
So, you could take 16 out.
Okay, good.
But I mean, that's just,
That's what Mark gave me. I guess I didn't delete it. Sorry about that.
Twice.
yeah. It's so important.
Yes, that's how important it
Yeah,
is.
I'll just add on the engineering side that those remaining comments are more applicable to a final approval consideration than preliminary, so they're in good shape as far as we're concerned.
Okay. Thanks.
And that's it. There are no remaining traffic comments. And everything else is kind of up to DOT at this point.
Liz, when I was going through this, we have the material for the big building, but they're planning on putting up two other buildings. Well, one is a...
Well, you have plans for the whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
We got a fast food restaurant and a car wash.
What? Say again?
Did we approve the material or just the construction? Because the big building, we're asking what the material is. And I don't remember us talking about the material.
Yeah, because, well, as I recall, we were shown the elevations for the car wash and the restaurant, and I made some comments, and I think the board also made some comments, and they changed some colors and textures, and, but, you know, if you want to take another look at those.
It's just right. I just want to make sure we did cover it, because I know we've done everything else that we've done, and we don't know what type of restaurant's going in. And
Yes, you don't know what the restaurant, so you
Yeah, so we
really
don't,
can't have...
we don't have the final details on the restaurant.
Well, they have a color scheme, and they, you know, so.
that goes
That
with
probably
who-
is going to change depending on what
Probably.
restaurant it is.
Yep.
And I don't know if they already have the person who's going to run the car wash, if they have a color scheme like, which we've already done for the other car wash.
Hi, Chris Michalak, SGW Architecture. The fast food outlot and the car wash outlot are not contracted yet. So once my client gets those two, those operators will be back to get their approval.
Okay.
So we'll have to address that somehow in the preliminary resolution of approval as well.
Which is what I was getting at, so.
Yes.
Right. So would those be amendments, or? I don't know how you tie architectural plans to plans, and I guess the concern that I had was, do you approve this plan, and you've been looking at these architectural plans all along the way because of the community character, and then all of a sudden a building permit comes in and the architectural is different. So that was my thinking, so I don't know how you usually deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, if I may, it's usually a condition of the approval that the plans have to be built according, or the project has to be built
Right.
according to the plans. And if there is a change in the future, like it would require an amendment before this board. So if all of a sudden a particular franchise or
Right.
development was proposed with a different scheme, and sometimes there's also minor site plan amendments as well associated with that because a particular building may have a slightly different layout.
Right.
And it would really, trigger the amendment process before this board.
So the architecture, it's okay that it can be an approval with the architecture being specific? Okay.
Well, for one thing, what I will put before the board is to consider a resolution of preliminary approval, which will have quite a number of conditions attached to it. That will be one of them, that any, more detail or changes in particular the car wash and the fast food restaurant will have to come back to the planning board as site plan amendments. We'll have to decide if the details for the self-storage building, which we've seen now go through a number of revisions, whether that one is sufficient, given that that's the one central element that we know is, basically ready to go. We normally actually also request material boards with all the samples, colors, materials. We should ask for that for the self-storage building, and we would ask for that later when it comes to the fast food restaurant and the car wash.
Do you want material boards for what has already been shown to you in terms of architecture? So you can start looking at those now?
Well, I think we should,
Or make that a
we should
condition?
request that now, and probably,
Right.
assuming we're going to go ahead with with authorizing a draft resolution of preliminary approval, I think that we should ask the applicant to provide the materials boards of the planning office before the next submission deadline in order to go ahead with the resolution.
Small, please, small votes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No.
You have.
So where were we? So are there any questions or comments from board members so far before we get into where we're going to be going?
This might be a little preliminary, but like, we're talking about the two different places. Car wash is one thing, but like the fast food or whatever it is, the restaurant, and I shouldn't say fast food right away, but just the fact of what it could be as fast food could have, I feel like a big thing on how the flow and everything could be if, like, you know, what kind of restaurant it is and what kind of chain it is could be a big effect on the whole project.
In the traffic.
One of the things that came up during the project review was that I had made a comment indicating that maybe there could be less parking because there's more than what's required, and the applicant's response letter basically said that it had to do with the variation in what kind of restaurant it could be, even though you have drive-through, so.
Well, I'm just talking
Right.
about, you know, there's a big difference
Good
between, you know, you get something, I don't say popularity, but I'm just saying, like,
Right.
if you had a Chick-fil-A,
Right.
that is like, that starts in the middle, the beginning of the morning, and people are constantly wanting to go there. So it
Right.
has a big
Right,
thing to the project.
right,
That's it.
right.
You know, this also, that most of the fast food places are going to 2 aisles going in, as opposed to the old 1 aisle. And the plans here only have it as 1 aisle, as far as I'm...
They're kind of limited in what they can do just based on the
I was gonna
space that they have. So
Yeah.
if they wanted to do something like that, it may not be feasible.
Yeah, it is a pretty tight site.
And that may dictate
But-
what fast food franchise
Right.
goes in there.
Right.
Liz,
All good points.
If I can ask you a question. One of our hot buttons was always Papa's Lane and what Papa's Lane was going to look like. And you had in your document some requests for looking at Papa's Lane a little bit more and defining it, what it's going to end up looking like. What are your thoughts here? Because our concern was that, right, that's essentially the only egress other than the turn, but essentially that Papa's Lane becomes the major thoroughfare for that area.
It's also, just as far as I understand from the traffic engineer, it's the best way for people to come in and out of the site.
Right.
Because then, there are, entrances and exits along the frontage, but those create their own hazards. So the idea is to maximize the use of Pappas Lane. I remember when this first started, we were asking, is that a town road? And we instantly found out, no, of course it isn't. It's private. And the way that it has looked on the plans seems like it isn't well-defined, but then when you really get looking at the meets and bounds and things, it has been defined at some point, because there are 2 properties that have been using it for I don't know how long, easily decades they've been using it. The bank, homes, whatever businesses were on this site that came and went. So it has been used, it hasn't been used for this level of traffic. And the thing is, the reason that I asked for it to be local road without sidewalks is that area that right now holds that road with all the driveways coming into it and the medians, there just isn't room to have sidewalks all along it. So it really can be 2 lanes, and I think the width is 25 feet for almost all of it, and maybe it goes to 26 feet wide at certain points. So it kind of fits for fitting in 2 lanes. It's still the best bet for funneling most of the traffic out to it and bringing the traffic out there.
But it also still has to accommodate the traffic into the area and
Yes.
into the private area.
There's a bank and, yeah, and homes. So, yeah, it will continue to accommodate that, and it'll be improved. And according to the engineering review and the traffic engineer, the improvements that are proposed for Pappas Lane will serve the site. And then, in addition to that, there were a lot of comments that I put in about directing people using the site to go out that way. And there are options to do that right from the gas station, and also for a lot of traffic to be funneled toward that big back road that was originally part of the site design.
How far into that road are they doing improvements?
Well, without looking at the plans, it's...
Up to the end of their property.
Right.
Huh?
Up to the end of their property.
Yep.
Okay.
Where they're, yeah, where all these improvements are being done. It'll be improved up to that point.
So to summarize, Liz or John, maybe you could just reiterate what has the applicant now shown on the plans, and what are you asking for as additional information that we don't have yet?
Okay. Let me just clarify something. So the back line of the project site is the line between the general business zoning district and the R15 zone. There isn't actually, I keep forgetting, there isn't actually a property line there. Okay? Because it's all one big, it's a bunch of big parcels, and the GB and the R15 line goes through it. So what's missing is a definition of what that road encompasses. If it's been, I sense that if it's been operating this way for probably decades, there had to be some kind of format and some sort of agreement. And in the response letter, an easement was mentioned, and when you look at the plans, you can kind of see the outline, but it's not well defined, and I think that for the purposes of approving a plan, there needs to be some kind of a description of that easement area that already exists theoretically, and then some kind of a description of what will happen within that easement area and who's responsible for it. So that's one of the kind of a general comments there.
Yeah, the maintenance agreement aspect is really important, but the physical, plans and design for it, I think we want to be very specific in terms of what we feel we don't have and what we need.
What's shown now is a road specific, it looks just like the local road specification that's in the town's highway specs. And there are existing, like curbed islands that are there, and the road will work within it. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically a repeat of what the current town spec is for a local road, without sidewalks.
Right.
Fitting within the,
Two
whatever
lanes.
the physical
Yes.
One each way.
curbs are, yeah.
Crossing over for, right? The concern that, in my mind, that might become a bottleneck is the crossing from the developed area to take a left. And traffic coming in, going either to the houses in the back or taking a right into that same exit or entrance, whatever. So it has to be structured in such a way that we don't create an issue there.
Right, and defined it and some kind of description of how it's to be managed so that whoever's using it now is included, right? And it's managed and maintained. So, yeah. We still need all those details.
It's definitely a massive increase of use of that road.
Yep. And I think the traffic engineer, knew how the traffic was going to go because he commented a lot about that road being used and encouraging traffic to be funneled in that direction. What else?
I was happy to see the addition of the proposed pedestrian crosswalk across 9D.
Yes.
And of course, that'll be subject to approval of New York State DOT. But it's great having it shown on the plans. This was something I noticed. So the applicant agrees that upon termination of the gas station lease, the right out only driveway onto 9D will be closed. That's assuming that DOT, allows it to stay open in its new configuration. But applicant agrees that upon termination of the lease, right out driveway will be closed. And notes on the plan sheets 5 and 6 state that the driveway will be replaced with full-height curbing. But I think perhaps the notes in the plan set should be revised to state that the driveway is to be closed and replaced with full-height curbing and sidewalk upon termination of the gas station lease. And what I mean by that is where the open driveway that will remain once it's reconfigured, once that's closed, if you don't have the curb and sidewalk added, then you'll have basically a sidewalk all around the other frontage, stop, and then go on. So anyway, that's just to clarify that
Good
point.
call.
Jonathan, can I piggyback on what you just said about the gas station?
Yeah.
At the termination of the lease, is that the current lease or an extended lease or a 99-year lease?
So that led me to that very question, so this raises the question of, number one, would there be anything proposed to replace the gas station and convenience store? Because actually, on page 8 of your response letter, the applicant also states that the gas station and convenience store are existing and will be closed upon termination of the lease. If that's correct, that does raise the question of what would replace the gas station and convenience store upon termination of the lease. And secondly, what is the official termination date of the lease? So that's really something we hadn't talked about before.
Should we have that in the file?
They gave a date for that.
Well, I think we heard it verbally stated, but I don't remember what it was, and it's not anything on the record.
I thought 27.
So
I believe it's 27. I don't have that date off the tip of my tongue, so I just don't want to give you the wrong information, but I will certainly get that information. I also just, going back to Pappas Lane, I just got the title report sent to me for the property, so I'm going to go through all that tomorrow. I'm sure I'll find that. I'll relay it to my engineer, and we'll get all that information. And then obviously, with respect to ongoing maintenance and everything, there will be standard condition of approval, but we'll put together a easement and declaration that outlines whose maintenance, who's going to maintain, whose responsibility that is moving forward. And we'll work with the bank who owns part of Pappas Lane to...
And the documents you'll be reviewing, does that include a meets and bounds description of the area?
I literally just got the title report 5 minutes ago. Hard to see on my phone, and there's tons of meets and bounds descriptions. I just have to go through it tomorrow and figure out what applies to what. I'm hopeful.
But might only give the half that he's applying. Because if it's halfway down the road, it's not going to give the second half of the meets and bounds for the bank side.
But it'll give me something to go on. Then I can have my title company look at the bank's property, pull that easement, and we could piece it together.
Yeah, good. Okay.
I suggest the survey was very helpful in terms of trying to put these pieces together. Not completely detailed, but.
And then the other thing I was going to mention, so sign details, as Liz mentioned, they're not all complete. But even within the, the basic site, It looks like there are at least 2 monument signs proposed, and both of those look like they significantly exceed the height and size limits of signs in the general business zone. And then it looks like there could be even a 3rd monument sign, which is the site ID sign at the corner of 9D and Pappas Lane. It's not really detailed at all, so it's hard to tell what exactly that sign is or is proposed to be. But I think my point here is that, and I know the applicant's memo indicated that there will be probably a number of sign variances that will have to be requested, although it's not known quite yet, but I can tell you now that those monument signs will be among them. And I think that you might want to take a new look at the heights and sizes of those signs, because I know that's been an issue, before. The planning board can't really dictate what the zoning board is going to do. They look at things, on their own basis, and their own criteria. But I think those signs are excessive, and they're going to need to be, I think, rethought before they go to the zoning board.
We will certainly have our architects take a look at that and review the code.
One of the reasons that I didn't get into looking at the signs is because I could tell I didn't have everything. I wasn't keyed to where it was going to be necessarily, and so I didn't dive into it because I just thought it would be.
Yeah, I only took a closer look because I noticed on the site plan sheet C6, both of the main monument signs were specified in notes on the plan as to the size and height that they would be. So I didn't even really bother trying to scale out the more conceptualized sign drawings.
Yeah.
And, by a quick look at the code, it was pretty easy to tell that they're significantly above the allowed signs. Do you have an answer to the question on that 3rd sign, that's the site ID sign, what that's intended to look like? Because there was really no information about that.
I don't know. I just spoke with the architect, so we'll drill down on that for you.
Okay. So that will be among the many conditions that would be in this if we get to a resolution of preliminary approval.
Is it kind of a general recommendation that because this is one of the corridor areas that the signs should be as conforming as possible?
Yeah.
I think was noted as a site ID sign. I think that's the existing gas station sign.
Right.
So we'll need to clarify that. That's the existing sign.
So it would just basically still be a gas station sign?
Correct.
All right, yeah, so that should be relabeled then, definitely.
Yes, for sure. And then per your comment, yes, they're currently as drawn, they're much larger than what the town code permits. So we'll take a look at those and scale them down.
And then once you get to the ZBA, there'll probably be further discussions on that.
Absolutely.
But I think you'd be better off starting off with something a little bit more practical.
Less tall, yeah, I agree. And the wall sign on the storage building will need a variance as well.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
John,
Yep.
do we have a photometric plan for this particular site in the documentation?
A lighting plan?
Lighting?
Yes.
Yes.
It's in the last couple submissions, Kevin?
Yep.
Was it in there?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Just didn't recall.
I think it's before some of the details. Oh, hang on, I
Is
can
it
tell
dark
you.
sky compliant? Because that was.
It's page 11 in your plan set.
Whatever they had was reviewed per your lighting, and they brought it back in line.
Okay. Sorry,
No,
John.
it's a good
okay.
question.
Any other questions before
Sheet 11.
I ask the key question?
Oh, okay, sorry.
For Dominic?
What?
So Dominic, would it be appropriate at this point if we ask you to draft a resolution of preliminary site development plan and special use permit approval for this, for the June 13th meeting with, as I mentioned, many, 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 many conditions.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'm not sure that I'll be able to, in the first draft, be able to capture all of the conditions, but I'm sure that, we'll get there eventually. But I think at this point, as you mentioned earlier, that asking for or considering a resolution for preliminary approval will be appropriate at this point, because it'll give the applicant some clear direction as to things that they need to do in order to move the project forward towards a conditional final, but also recognizes the fact that the board has procedurally conducted its public review at this point. You've also previously adopted a negative declaration for the project as well, and so it is the logical next step.
So just briefly, I listed a few of the things I had been thinking about as possible conditions. So obviously, obtaining any necessary variances from the ZBA, New York State DOT approval of access and improvements on 9D, no blasting.
Yeah. For the DOT approval, if I may, typically a highway work permit is issued to actually the contractor when they're ready to begin work. So I think it would be appropriate to list as a condition that they have to get conceptual approval of the improvements, just so that we're all on the same page as far as that's concerned.
Okay, good. Probably something about future protection of that landscape buffer that crosses over in the R15 district. A lot of these things can, will carry over and be conditions of final approval as well, but improvements to and maintenance of Pappas Lane, a real important one. All the engineering comments that really have to be completed, public sewer and water connections, all that stuff. We still really haven't heard anything from the fire department, so I think before final approval, we're going to need to hear they're okay on access and hydrants and all that, and health department approvals. So, those are just the ones I thought of off the top of my head. But probably this will be one of those resolutions, Dominic, that maybe we'll have to, have some back and forth conversations about as it develops.
Happy to. Thank you.
All right. Well, with all that, is there a motion to authorize Dominic Cordisco to prepare a draft resolution of preliminary site development plan and special use permit approval for the Basis Industrial Site, Basis Industrial Route 9D application for the board's consideration at the June 13th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Felix moves it. Fred seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that carries 7-0. Any further thoughts from the applicants or board members or anyone else?
I just want to thank you all, as always, for your time. Appreciate all the work you put in.
Thank you. You too.
Have a great evening.
How you doing? All right.
What are we going to do now?
Yeah, what do we do for the next 15 minutes? No, I actually had two things that I could bring up, but I really don't feel like it. So, just basically anything else that board members or staff would like to bring up. And the next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, June 13th, with a deadline submission date of Wednesday, May 29th at 2 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Definitely.
First and second.
Fred moves it, Bob seconds it. Fred moves it, Bob seconds it, and Debbie votes all in favor.
You know what, I couldn't hear a damn thing tonight. I couldn't hear a damn thing.
Thanks, everyone.